When it was his turn, my father-in-law's name was called, and he disappeared into the exam room with the nurse. However, when I tried to follow, the nurse stopped me. Suspicious, I was led in the opposite direction of the exam room and taken to a separate room. There, a slender doctor was present, and his sharp eyes fixed on me intently. Then, as if making up his mind, he began to speak.
How much do you know?
Excuse me? Not understanding what he was referring to, I stood there with my mouth agape.
Oh, sorry. I mean,
His hesitant reply made me more suspicious. What was he trying to say?
Really, you're as inarticulate as ever, Mike.
When I turned my gaze, there stood my husband, who was supposed to be on a business trip, like a statue. Why is he here? Ignoring my confusion, he said.
I want you to see this.
As he spoke, he operated his smartphone and showed it to me. What? No way. Why? I widened my eyes and stared intently at the screen. My own pottery, which I had made, was being sold on an unfamiliar website. Shock and turmoil mixed, confusing me. Of course, I had no idea about it. Who on earth would do such a thing? I felt more sad than angry, a whirlwind of emotions in my heart.
I need to check something with Mike about my dad.
That caught me off guard. What does he intend to check about my father-in-law? I eagerly awaited my husband's next words. My name is Jade. I live with my husband, Kevin, and my father-in-law, Raymond. Raymond, the weather is nice today. The azaleas in the garden are starting to bloom.
Is that so? Is it that time already?
My father-in-law, smiling gently next to me, is actually blind. I knew he had poor eyesight for a long time. His vision gradually narrowed as the edges of his field of view darkened. Without knowing the cause, his treatment didn't progress, and he managed with his wife's help. However, his condition rapidly worsened after he lost his wife. Neither Kevin nor I ever imagined that he would lose his sight so quickly. Kevin said he couldn't leave Raymond alone, living by himself blind. That's right. It's dangerous to be alone.
There have been fraud cases recently, too.
Kevin and I discussed it and decided to move in with him. By the way, Raymond can't work, so now he's living on disability benefits. This was arranged by his late wife, and a substantial amount was regularly deposited into his account. It seems it was withdrawn little by further, but a considerable amount remained. We could have hired a home caregiver with that much money, but Raymond refused. Don't waste money, he insisted. I quit my job to take care of Raymond. My boss regretted losing someone as capable as me, but it couldn't be helped. I decided to work part-time a few days a week and take on caregiving and all the household chores.
Jade, I'm really sorry you had to quit your job.
I expected it. Don't worry about it. How about you?
Yeah, actually, the company has decided to expand overseas, so I might start traveling more.
My husband works for a manufacturer, but I hadn't heard about him traveling abroad before. Isn't that great? I was thrilled, but Kevin seemed somewhat down.
But, I'll miss being with you, Jade.
He sighed softly and trudged off to the bathroom. It was the first time I'd seen him look so dejected. He's usually all smiles, and rarely talks about feeling lonely. So his remark was unexpected, and it took me by surprise. Was my enthusiasm a mistake? As he mentioned, from the next month, his business trips increased, and naturally, he was away from home more often. I was busy every day preparing meals for Raymond, cleaning the house, and working part-time. However, while shopping at the supermarket, a thought struck me. Caring for Raymond was easier than I had expected. When we first moved in together, I thought I'd have to help him with bathing, elimination, moving around the house, and when going out. I assumed I would have to feed him since he couldn't use cutlery. But in reality, he can take a shower and use the restroom on his own. He eats fairly neatly with a spoon. He walks smoothly around the house and doesn't stumble on napkin holders or anything.
It's easy because I'm used to the house.
He would say with a smile. Surprisingly, he can even perform simple operations on his smartphone. He uses voice recognition to make calls and look things up. If I heard talking in Raymond's room, he was discussing Johnny Appleseed with AI integrated into his smartphone. I hardly use my smartphone for anything other than calls and messages. Still, regular checkups are necessary, and Raymond attends them regularly. But whenever I suggest going with him, he strangely prefers to go alone. But there are crosswalks. It's dangerous.
It's fine because they make noise.
And getting on and off the bus.
I can do it by myself.
Pouting, he puffed out his cheeks and stumbled out alone. Worried, I secretly followed him once and saw that he indeed crossed the street alone and managed the bus without any problems. Later, I found out he navigates using his smartphone's voice guidance. Raymond stubbornly tries to do everything by himself, almost as if he's trying to keep a distance from me. However, it's fortunate that I'm not overwhelmed by caregiving and housework alone. With some time and emotional space to spare, I was able to try out a pottery class nearby. It was only a one-day experience, but I enjoyed it immensely and quickly got hooked. Since then, I've started teaching myself a bit at home. I bought a pottery magazine and read an article that caught my eye. It said that small pieces could even be fired in a home oven. As I read further, it seems there is indeed such a type of clay. Everything needed can mostly be bought at dollar stores, making it easy to get into pottery at home. I decided to sneak in sometime and try it out in the middle of the night. Back in elementary and middle school, my art grades were pretty bad. Me, starting pottery of all things. Every day was exciting, and I even found myself humming. One night, as my husband came to the kitchen for water, he saw me kneading clay while humming.
What are you making? Giant cookies.
He pointed at the light brown clay, flattened out on parchment paper. I was spreading it out to make a plate.
Oh, I thought it was a midnight snack.
Sorry about that, but please have a look when it's finished. Good night, he said, and went back to his room. He would be on a business trip again tomorrow. He seemed like he wanted to talk more, but perhaps out of consideration, he left quickly. It felt like we were somehow missing each other, but not that we were on bad terms. A strange sensation. To shake off that feeling, I focused on my pottery. Initially, I made simple shapes like plates and napkin holders. But as I got used to it, that wasn't satisfying enough. Yet, I couldn't make real pottery pieces. While pondering what to make, a gust of wind scattered the papers and envelopes on my desk. I had forgotten I left the window open because it was the afternoon. Oops, I hurriedly picked them up and pressed them down with a nearby jar. That's it. A paperweight might be small enough to make. Thinking it wasn't for a show anyway, I decided to make it with a light heart. Something stylish would be nice. As I kneaded the clay, an image of the cat we used to have come to mind. We had rescued the stray and named him Belle, and my husband and I cared for him dearly. I decided to model the paperweight after Belle. Once I thought of it, the idea came quickly. What did his face look like? His hands, his feet, his tail. I gradually remembered. In a photo on my smartphone, Belle, with his split bangs, didn't seem to mind being held by Kevin. Back then, the three of us had fun times together. Belle is over the Rainbow Bridge now, and I wonder if he's doing well. The Belle paperweight, after much trial and error, was finished in about a month. I was so pleased that I wanted to show it to someone. Just then, I had plans to go out for lunch with friends, so I brought it along to show them. They took out their smartphones, saying, "How cute!" I was surprised at the positive reception. Next to the pasta dishes at lunch, Belle's somewhat contented expression had a certain charm. My friends asked if I could make one for them too. Really? It's just amateur homemade stuff. Turns out, that's exactly why they liked it. The next month, I brought a few more Belle weights, each in a different pose. My friends each took their favorite, and I was left with one of Belle washing his face. A week later, I realized that one of my friends, who had taken a Belle weight, had been trying to contact me multiple times. She said that after she posted about the weight on social arts network sites, she received dozens of emails in just 3 days. Most of them were asking, "I want one too, but where are they sold?" I was surprised by such a reaction. I hadn't expected it. My friends kept encouraging me to sell them online, insisting they would definitely sell. But I hadn't made them to sell. I only thought of it as a hobby, and the idea of turning it into money made me uncomfortable. Plus, I'm not tech savvy, so I had no idea how to go about it. I only check my smartphone every 2 or 3 days for messages from friends. While I was pondering what to do, the inquiries kept increasing, surpassing 100 emails. Feeling somewhat guilty, my friends started insisting on paying me properly. I felt like I was the one who should be apologizing. I've instructed them to reply with "not for sale" to any messages on social networks. At another lunch, the topic came up again. Maybe I should just accept enough to cover the material cost. I'm not trying to make a career as a pottery artist. That's enough, they agreed, and happily contributed that amount. Kevin was also interested in the small figurine. When he came back from a trip, he found the Belle weight on the desk and exclaimed,
Wow! Is this Belle? Did you make this?
He picked it up between his thumb and forefinger and brought it over to me, looking pleased. Yes, doesn't it look like him?
Awesome! It's cute. It looks a lot like Belle.
When I mentioned it had become a bit of a topic online, he beamed.
Selling online is easy. Just set up a site, post some photos.
Ever heard of easier said than done?
I'll help out. I'm still an active salesperson, you know.
He patted his chest, all eager. He started muttering about e-commerce sites and strategizing. But selling means starting a business. And I wasn't confident I could start that lightly. I'm really not interested in selling. I took the bell weight from his hand and put it back on the desk. Besides, look, I'm not good with this internet stuff.
I'll help you with it.
Ah, by the way, I finished that plate I mentioned. I'll bring it here. I turned around and opened the storage cabinet in the kitchen. I couldn't see what expression Kevin had on his face. When I returned from the kitchen, he had disappeared. Only the weight of Belle washing his face was left on the desk. Belle, what should I do? Belle didn't answer. It seemed as if he said, do whatever, meow, while continuing to wash his face. On a day when the sky was filled with scattered clouds. As I returned home humming, Raymond asked, did something good happen today? That day, I had shown the pottery teacher the bell weight. I had casually mentioned my pottery to Raymond, but it hadn't been a topic of conversation before. I went to show the pottery piece I talked about before to the teacher. Sitting in a chair in the living room, Raymond listened intently to my voice.
Oh, what kind of plate was it?
It wasn't a plate this time, it was a figurine. As I said this, I felt something was off. What did Raymond just say? Beside me, smiling, he spoke again.
I wish I could do pottery too.
Excuse me? I was taken aback, but I saw this as a great opportunity. It could be a chance to bond with Raymond, who seemed to be keeping his distance. Then, maybe he wouldn't have to cross streets alone, which could be dangerous. You can do it, I'm sure. Raymond, you seem to be good with your hands. There are people who paint, even though they can't see. I let Raymond touch sample plates and napkin holders and taught him to mold the clay into similar shapes. Because he can't see, he repeatedly confirmed the shapes with his fingertips while kneading the clay. He seemed to find the texture, coldness, and softness of the clay refreshing and enjoyable. He continued making them even while I was at work. When I returned home, several creations were lined up on parchment paper. Though somewhat misshaped, each was charming. Wow, these are good. I carefully took them to the drying rack, making sure not to disturb them. As they dried, I baked each one in the oven. While spending time this way, I noticed another oddity. Oh no, the bell that I left here is gone. The weight of Belle washing his face that should have been on the desk was missing. I also realized that the rabbit and frog figurines and napkin holders that were supposed to be there were gone. When I asked Raymond, he mentioned he might have accidentally broken or thrown them away.
I always carry them around as samples. I'm sorry.
Is that so?
I'm really sorry. Because I can't see even the cat figurine.
With a disheartened look, he hung his head, and I couldn't press him any further. It's okay. Maybe, just maybe, gnomes took them. I said this with a laugh, trying to lighten the mood. Even with such a childish remark, Raymond seemed relieved. His creativity continued, but I began to notice a clear unease in his actions. When I mentioned this to my husband, he looked incredulous. I'm usually not here because of work or business trips." He mumbled, clearly puzzled. During those unsettled days, the date for Raymond's regular checkup arrived. My husband had been out since morning on a business trip. It seemed that through pottery, Raymond and I had become somewhat closer, and today I was able to accompany him. We arrived at the hospital before noon, took a number in the waiting room, and waited our turn. The receptionist seemed to be talking about something while glancing our way. Or perhaps I was just being paranoid. Rethinking it, I focused on the pottery magazine I had brought. Soon it was Raymond's turn, and he was called into the exam room with the nurse. However, when I tried to follow, the nurse stopped me. Why, I wondered. Since it was my first time accompanying Raymond, perhaps they were checking my identity. While I was puzzled, I was led in the opposite direction of the exam room and taken to a separate room. Inside, a slender doctor sat down and handed a clear file to the nurse. After the nurse left, the doctor turned his gaze toward me. His name tag simply read, Mike Myers. His sharp eyes intently fixed on me, and he began to speak as if making up his mind.
How much do you know?
Excuse me? What was he talking about? Confused, I just stared open-mouthed at Mike. I assumed it was about Raymond's vision, but something seemed off. It's my first time accompanying him to the exam, so I'm not sure what you mean.
Oh, sorry. I should have explained better.
His hesitant reply increased my suspicion. What is it?
Because,
He suddenly looked behind me. Turning around, there was my husband Kevin, standing there assertively, though he was supposed to be on a business trip.
Really, you're as inarticulate as ever.
I couldn't hide my surprise as he sighed in exasperation. Kevin, why are you here?
I had something to check with Mike about Dad.
The mention of Dad caught me off guard. What did Kevin need to check with Mike about Raymond? From the way he casually referred to him as Mike, they seemed to be quite close. Apparently, they've been friends since their college days.
I have something I want to confirm too. Ma'am, it's about Raymond.
At the word, ma'am, I suddenly became flustered.
Please tell me about his usual behavior.
Asked about his usual behavior, I described everything from the time he wakes up to when he goes to bed. He can take a shower and use the restroom by himself, and he eats his meals properly. He also goes to his regular checkups alone and enjoys chatting on his smartphone at home. As I described Raymond's everyday demeanor, Mike nodded in understanding. I also mentioned that Raymond recently started pottery and is very engaged with it, even when I'm not around during the day. I showed Mike photos of Raymond's pottery works that I had taken with my smartphone. His recent works are well shaped, and the awkwardness is gone. Mike hummed softly as he looked at them.
Is there anything else? Particularly, have you noticed anything unusual about Raymond's behavior?
Asked this, I paused to think. The only thing that comes to mind is his insistence on doing everything by himself, even though he's supposed to be completely blind. It seems like he's trying to keep a distance from me.
Understood. Anything else you are concerned about?
Well, actually, I remembered. Just a few days ago, some of my pottery works had disappeared from the house. When I asked Raymond, He said he might have accidentally thrown them away because he couldn't see. Well, that stuck with me. Going back a bit, there was an unease I felt just before he expressed his desire to try pottery. I mentioned to my pottery teacher that I was going to show him my pottery piece, but at that time, Raymond had asked, "What kind of plate was it?" Both start with a P sound, so I thought it was just a minor thing, I reasoned. Yet, he seemed to clearly understand it as a plate. It was as if he had seen me making plates before and knew about it. Then Kevin started speaking.
I want you to see this too.
As he spoke, he operated his smartphone and showed it to me. There on the screen was a photo of the bell paperweight that I thought was lost. Looking closely, it had a price tag and appeared to be listed on some sales site. What? No, why? I widened my eyes and stared intently at the screen. Despite not remembering posting it, why is it here? A mix of surprise and turmoil swirled in my mind, confusing me. I felt more sadness than anger swirling in my heart.
You really didn't know about this site or that your works were being sold online, did you, Jade?
I nodded solemnly to my husband's gaze. No, I have no idea about this. Who could have done this?
We'll find out soon.
He murmured meaningfully and made a phone call somewhere. Mike nodded firmly, watching my husband. Not understanding what was going on, I watched them both.
Hello, is this the police?
Seeing my husband calling the police, I was dumbstruck. The story goes back 2 days. My husband was introduced to a site selling cat figurines during a break with a colleague at work. Curious, he was told to check out a figurine that caught his interest.
He showed it to me because it's rare to see a design of a cat washing its face.
He instantly recognized it as the bell weight I made. The seller's information claimed they were selling the works to fund stray cat rescue activities. The artist was described as fully blind, which gave Kevin a bad feeling.
The artist's name is Raymond, blind, and the figurine looked familiar.
He said, "There's only one person who could have had access to it."
It's unlikely Jade is involved. You're not interested in selling.
Kevin also remembered the odd feeling I had mentioned.
If I hadn't listened to Jade, I wouldn't have noticed. Maybe Dad.
Maybe he can actually see.
He hesitantly said. Mike took over.
Just 2 days ago, Kevin contacted me about his father. He was really surprised when I said I was handling it.
Mike had doubts about Raymond's vision. He appeared blind during examinations, but his walk and movements suggested otherwise, as noted by the nurses.
I don't want to suspect a patient, but
He said this with his eyes downcast, when suddenly the hallway erupted into noise. As we hurried out of the room, there was Raymond being questioned by 2 police officers who had arrived. He was shouting something, seemingly in a state of panic. "Raymond?" As I started to rush over, Kevin grabbed my arm to stop me. Immediately after, Raymond shook off the police officer's hand and dashed away at full speed. In the waiting room, there were many patients, and colliding with them would not have ended well. Yet, he elegantly dodged not only the chairs in the waiting room, but also the patients and nurses sitting there. Like a soccer player weaving through opponents before a goal. While everyone was taken aback, 2 police officers quickly chased after Raymond and caught him in no time.
Let me go. I can't see.
His cries were in vain, as it was clear he could see. The police officers made Raymond stand up and took him away for questioning. Later investigations revealed that Raymond had created and operated a fraudulent sales site. This site sold his works, as well as some of mine. It turned out that the motive was money, but the claim that it was for stray cat rescue funds was a lie. He confessed that he did it because his pension was not enough to live on. After the commotion at the hospital, the local media came every day, requesting interviews. The story of Raymond faking blindness and deceiving even his family to sell homemade cat figurines became a bit of news. "Sorry, I can't answer that," I would reply through the intercom every day. As for Raymond, he was looked at coldly by the neighborhood and hardly ever came out from under his covers. At a loss, we decided to ask for help from his brother, Terrell, who used to be a self-defense officer known as a fierce instructor. Though he is very kind-hearted, his strong sense of justice made him furious about Raymond's actions. Despite living 3 hours away by train, Terrell came charging over with a furious expression.
Completely shameful. I'm going to straighten you out at my house for a while.
He yanked the covers off and grabbed trembling Raymond by the scruff of his neck.
Terrell, please stop. I don't want to go outside.
Raymond pleaded, crying, but he was no match for Terrell, known as the fierce instructor. "I'm sorry for the trouble," was all Terrell said before he left with Raymond on the train. Raymond had always been submissive to his brother, Terrell.
There's no way he can do any harm now. This should make Dad live honestly from now on.
Kevin said, looking sad. "It's for the best." Kevin immediately shut down the website Raymond had created, but unexpectedly, something happened online.
Today, that colleague told me.
Even though the site was supposed to be closed, photos from the site were being shared on social media by someone who had seen it. Compared to Raymond's cat figurines, mine were noted for their gentle expressions, becoming popular because they seemed to reflect the personality of the maker.
The colleague now wants a bell weight too.
Excited, Kevin seemed very pleased. "But the site is closed, and I'm not really into online selling,"
About that.
Kevin said, cutting in quickly. A friend of his colleague runs a local craft store. The shop owner, a woman who had seen my work on social media, expressed her interest in selling it in her store. However, she had trouble contacting me because she didn't know my details. "By this neighborhood, do you mean that stylish shop on the corner?"
Yes, exactly. Maybe you could visit tomorrow.
Encouraged by him, I decided to visit the shop immediately. The shop owner, who wore many cat accessories, was clearly a cat lover. I agreed to her offer, and we decided to display my work in her store. Later, I brought over not only paperweights, but also figurines and plates to display. I felt a mix of slight joy and anxiety about whether they would really sell. I marketed the pieces under the artist's name, Verticat Bell, and they began to sell one after another. Often, they would sell out while I was still making more. The earnings were just pocket money, but they filled me with surprise and joy. I decided to donate a portion of the proceeds to stray cat rescue efforts. I thought Belle would be happy about that. This donation initiative led to increased interactions with others involved in stray cat rescue, and even local artists. The pottery teacher sometimes visits too. My days are fulfilling and enjoyable. Now, they call me Belle after my beloved cat. It feels a bit odd to be called by my cat's name, but I believe it's a connection that she helped forge. Right, Belle? I gazed at the Belle paperweight washing its face on the living room table.
I'm home.
Kevin had returned home unnoticed and approached with a beaming smile. What's the occasion?
Today is our anniversary and the day we first met Belle.
As he spoke, he placed a box of cake next to Belle. Oh, that's right. Overwhelmed with happiness, I instinctively hugged Kevin. Belle seemed to smile and say, "Do whatever, meow," while continuing to wash its face.
Stay here for a while, okay? Don't come out until morning.
To my surprise, my father-in-law Robert, who wasn't supposed to be able to move without a wheelchair, was standing there. With a stern expression, he said this and then left the basement, leaving me in shock. What is going on? Wait a minute, please. I tried to chase after him in a panic, but the basement door closed right in front of me, and he locked it from the outside. Robert, please let me out of here. I pounded on the door in a panic, trying to get help, but the basement was soundproofed, and no sound could be heard outside. Why on earth? I collapsed helplessly onto the basement floor. I didn't have my phone with me because I had been brought here right after waking up. There was no way to contact the outside world. Ouch, it hurts. Even though I was told to rest, the unexpected situation caused pain in the area where I had surgery. Why did he lock me up here? Was I going to be left like this forever? The thought made me shiver. After a while, something unexpected happened. The basement, about the size of a small room, had furniture like a sofa and a table, and a TV was mounted on the wall. Even though I hadn't touched anything, the TV suddenly lit up, showing a video. What appeared on the screen was so unbelievable that I could hardly trust my own eyes. My name is Alice, and I'm just an ordinary office worker at a regular company. I lost my mom during my school years and was raised in a single-parent household, but my relationship with my dad was strained. He was a workaholic and left all the household matters to my mom, so he probably didn't know how to interact with me. At home, we barely had any conversations. In rebellion against my dad, I moved out right after graduating college. I started working at my current company, and a few years into my job, I had an encounter. I met Aaron, a salesperson at one of our clients, shortly after I joined the company due to a mistake in some documents. I noticed the mistake in the documents Aaron's department had prepared and immediately reached out, and fortunately, we managed to avoid any problems. To thank me, Aaron invited me out for dinner. After a few dates, we started dating and got married 6 months later. When I was unsure whether to invite my estranged father to my wedding, Aaron told me,
"There might have been a lot in the past, but maybe the wedding could be a good chance to reconcile. You should invite your dad to the ceremony."
Even though he said that, I wasn't eager. And while I was still unsure, Aaron decided to meet my dad alone and ask him to attend the wedding. Surprisingly, my dad agreed, and it would be the first time I saw him since moving out of parent house. He was pretty awkward with me, but still he said, "Congratulations on your marriage." At that moment, I realized for the first time how awkward my dad was. Thanks to Aaron's efforts, I was able to reconcile with my dad. However, just as I was feeling happy, my dad suddenly passed away due to an unexpected illness, just 6 months after I married Aaron. If I had known this would happen, I should have made up with him sooner. I'm sorry, Dad. I apologized to my dad in his casket, crying. But my dad couldn't respond anymore. After his funeral, I felt regretful that I couldn't do anything for my parents and was deeply depressed. With both my parents gone, I felt completely alone. But Aaron and his parents comforted me.
From now on, you've got us as your family. You don't need to worry about anything.
That's right. I think of you as my real daughter, Alice, so please rely on us for anything.
Even Aaron's usually quiet and reserved dad nodded at his mom's words. Thanks to them, I was able to overcome my grief over losing my dad and look ahead. However, it later became clear that their kindness was a lie, but at that time, I had no clue about the malice behind their smiles. A few years after my dad's funeral, my father-in-law, Robert, had a self-inflicted car accident while he's driving. Fortunately, his life wasn't in danger, but he injured both of his legs in the accident and ended up in a wheelchair. The police investigation found a problem with the brakes on Robert's car. They said that was probably the cause of the accident. Robert could no longer go golfing, which he loved, and he ended up staying inside the houses all the time. Being stuck at home made him feel down, and he started taking it out on my mother-in-law, Carol, more often. "Are you okay, Carol?" When I went over to their houses, I could see the exhaustion on her face.
He's the one suffering the most. I'm fine.
She took care of Robert devotedly since he couldn't move the way he wanted. To help cheer him up, she decided to start gardening in their yard, hoping the flowers would lift his spirits. Before long, the garden was full of blooming flowers, and it became a topic of conversation around the neighborhood. But despite all her dedication, Robert's stubbornness didn't change. In fact, he became even more insistent on refusing any interaction with others, withdrawing into his room in isolation. Even though Carol said she was okay, taking care of someone is physically exhausting.
Hey, Alice, I've got something to discuss. How about we move in with my parents?
One day, Aaron brought it up. Currently, Aaron and I lived about 10 minutes away by car from his parents' house, just the two of us. His suggestion was for me to quit my job and move in with his parents to help take care of his dad. I've been worried about them too, and I'll do whatever I can. I agreed to Aaron's proposal. After all, I had always wanted to repay the kindness Aaron's parents had shown me when they comforted me after my dad's passing. And so, our life living with Aaron's parents began. However, Robert's condition was much worse than I had imagined. We tried to divide up the care as much as possible. Carol cooked, and I was in charge of delivering the meals and feeding him. Not being able to walk since the accident must have been incredibly stressful, as Robert had become very irritable.
Don't do anything unnecessary.
Whenever I tried to help take care of him, he would often drive me out of his room.
Leave me alone.
He was fussy about other things too. Every day, Carol, who was an excellent cook, made homemade soup for his health, but he wouldn't take even a single sip and instead threw it out the window.
This stuff is undrinkable.
Seeing him trembling with rage and dismissing the soup like that, I found myself at a complete loss. He would eat regular meals, but adamantly refused the soup. But I knew forcing it on him wouldn't make him drink it, so I chose not to push him. Still, I couldn't bring myself to tell Carol that the homemade soup was being thrown out every day. Instead, I kept lying to her. He drank it, and it looked like he enjoyed it.
That soup is really good for him. If he drinks it, maybe he'll become a bit kinder.
It pained me to lie to Carol, who didn't know the truth, but I just couldn't bring myself to tell her. Robert continued to stay shut in his room, showing no signs of change. Even when I spoke to him, there was no trace of the kind Robert he used to be, and all I got were cold replies.
Stop wasting your time caring for an old man like me. and just leave. Your forced kindness is just annoying.
He yelled at me to get out more and more, and I felt really down seeing how much he'd changed. Carol suggested that perhaps his injuries from the accident were causing symptoms similar to dementia. Robert was still in his 60s. If it really was dementia, it was way too early. The thought that he might never return to the kind man he used to be made me feel incredibly sad. About 6 months went by like this, and one day, I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my stomach and lost consciousness. When I came to, I was in the hospital, and the doctor diagnosed me with a stomach ulcer. They said it was probably caused by the stress of caregiving. Due to the unexpectedly heavy bleeding, surgery was necessary. I was worried about my in-laws while I was in the hospital, but there was nothing I could do about it if I had to be admitted.
Don't worry about anything at home. Just rest and get better.
Since Aaron told me that, I decided to take him up on his offer. My surgery was successful, but I couldn't go home until the wound healed properly. In the end, I stayed in the hospital for 3 more weeks. Aaron and Carol visited me every few days to check on how I was doing.
Don't worry about things over here. Just focus on getting better.
I'm looking forward to the day Alice comes home.
They both said such kind words to me. But Robert never came to visit, partly because of his bad legs and partly because he clearly disliked me. I felt a little lonely, but I had no choice but to accept it. Would he stay like this forever? Even though he was so harsh, I couldn't bring myself to hate him when I remembered the kind Robert he used to be. Once I got discharged, I planned to do my best to see if we could find some common ground. After a while, my wound completely healed, and I got permission from the doctor to leave the hospital. However, even after returning home, I was told by the doctor to rest for a while. Having been cooped up in the hospital for weeks, I thought I'd move around a lot once I was discharged, but the doctor warned me that was out of the question.
If you don't take it easy, you'll end up back in the hospital.
Hearing that, I promised the doctor with a wry smile. I am resting at home. A few days after finally getting back home, I woke up to a noise. It was the sound of someone knocking on my bedroom door. Since Aaron and I slept in separate rooms, someone had definitely come looking for me. I checked the clock, and it was 2 a.m. Who could possibly need something at this hour? Feeling puzzled, I rubbed my sleepy eyes and opened the door leading to the hallway. Whoa! Suddenly, someone grabbed my arm. The hallway was dark, and I couldn't see who it was. I tried to resist in my confusion and fear, but my body was trembling and I couldn't move properly. I was dragged by this mysterious person into the basement. In my in-laws' basement, there's a room that Robert had built for his karaoke hobby, but it hadn't been used recently, and I had never seen anyone go in there. Who are you? As soon as we entered the basement, the light was turned on, illuminating the room, and I finally saw who had brought me here. To my shock, it was Robert, who supposedly couldn't move without a wheelchair, standing upright.
Stay here for a while, okay? Don't come out until morning.
With a stern expression, he said this and then left the basement, leaving me in shock. What is going on? Wait a minute, please. I tried to chase after him in a panic, but the basement door closed right in front of me, and he locked it from the outside. Robert, please let me out of here. I pounded on the door in a panic, trying to get help, but the basement was soundproofed, and no sound could be heard outside. Why on earth? I collapsed helplessly onto the basement floor. I didn't have my phone with me because I had been brought here right after waking up. There was no way to contact the outside world. Ouch. It hurts. Even though I was told to rest, the unexpected situation caused pain in the area where I had surgery. Why did he lock me up here? Was I going to be left like this forever? The thought made me shiver. However, after a while, something unexpected happened. The basement, about the size of a small room, had furniture like a sofa and a table, and a TV was mounted on the wall. Even though I hadn't touched anything, the TV suddenly lit up, showing a video. What appeared on the screen was so unbelievable that I could hardly trust my own eyes.
She's gone. Where on earth did Alice go?
Could it be that she found out about the plan?
The screen showed Aaron and Carol searching for me around the house. And that wasn't all. Aaron was holding a metal bat, and Carol was gripping a shining knife. It was impossible to see them as the kind Carol and dependable Aaron I knew. They were cursing as they frantically searched the house. Then, in front of the two of them, who were desperately looking for me with an almost demonic expression, appeared Robert, the same one who had just locked me in the basement. But unlike earlier, he was now in his usual wheelchair.
Hey, it looks like Alice ran outside. I just saw a shadow out there.
Damn it. Did we get too hasty? I can't believe she escaped.
Aaron and his mom stomped their feet in frustration.
There's no evidence anyway. Let's think of another plan.
It seemed they agreed with Robert's suggestion. The two of them nodded silently, unaware that I was listening, and began discussing their future plans. Aaron and Carol were both after my inheritance. Actually, I had inherited a large fortune from my late dad, who was quite wealthy. Aaron and Carol were unaware of this fact during my relationship with Aaron, but later they found out about my dad's wealth and took the opportunity to reconcile us. This is unbelievable. From their conversation, I learned that Aaron had suffered a huge loss in stock investments, and Carol had accumulated massive debts from buying luxury goods. Aaron had even been embezzling money from his company to repay his monthly debts. It seemed like the embezzlement hadn't been discovered yet, but from the way he was panicking about needing to pay back the money quickly, it didn't seem like they had much time left.
If we could just get our hands on her money, we could start over. There's no way I'll let her escape.
How could she have found out about our plan? That awful woman. We will find her, no matter what.
They planned to make my death look like a robbery in order to take my inheritance. Believing that I had escaped, they rushed outside to chase after me. After a while, the basement door opened again.
That's the way it is. I'm sorry, but bear with it until morning.
With these cryptic words, Robert closed the basement door once more. Just like before, he wasn't using a wheelchair. He was walking on his own feet. What on earth was going on? No matter how hard I thought about it, I couldn't grasp the full situation. The only thing I understood was that Robert seemed to be on my side, and that his supposed disability was a lie.
Damn it. She got away.
Where did that woman go?
I turned my attention back to the monitor. Aaron and Carol were back in the living room, cursing in frustration.
Looks like she knows our whole plan now. I doubt she's coming back here.
What if she goes to the police?
Relax. There's no evidence. If she had anything, we'd already be in cuffs instead of her barely escaping at the last second.
I guess you're right.
Hearing Aaron's words, Carol smiled, looking somewhat relieved. It was now clear that neither of them had any hesitation about hurting people for money. Seeing this dark side of Aaron and Carol, which I'd never known while living with them, sent a chill down my spine.
Well, the plan's changed, but let's deal with this first.
Carol pointed the knife she was holding at Robert.
Yeah, this one's gonna be easier to handle because he can't run away.
Aaron approached Robert in the wheelchair, holding the metal bat. It seemed that they had decided to change their target to Robert. But what on earth was going on, considering that they had been planning to attack me just moments ago? I had no idea, but since I couldn't get out of the basement, there was nothing I could do. I could only hold my breath and watch the situation unfold through the monitor.
So you're betraying me?
We were originally going to kill you too. Give it up.
The insurance payout is huge, you know. That accident back then was lucky. I never thought you'd survive it.
The two of them revealed that they had planned from the start to kill Robert after me. In fact, the car accident Robert had was because Carol tampered with the brakes. She also admitted that she had been mixing a small amount of poisonous herbs into his soup every day.
Your body is surprisingly stubborn. It took forever for you to get sick. But the poison must have built up by now, enough that you can't fight back when we come after you like this.
Apparently, her sudden interest in gardening wasn't to cheer up his husband. It was to secretly grow poisonous herbs. She had been mixing those herbs into his soup, slowly weakening him to shorten his life.
We're gonna make good use of your insurance money, so just quietly go to the afterlife.
They clearly thought that they could easily get rid of my wheelchair-bound Robert. But just as it seemed he was cornered, Robert suddenly burst out laughing.
Sorry, but I haven't taken a single sip of your soup.
What? But the bowl was always empty.
I knew you were trying to harm me. There's no way I'd drink such suspicious soup. And by the way, I don't actually need this wheelchair.
With that, Robert slowly stood up from his wheelchair. The two of them, who had been acting so confident, were clearly stunned.
What the heck? I thought you couldn't walk.
I was only pretending to be unable to walk to let you drop your guard.
You deceitful coward.
Both Aaron and Carol started cursing him, conveniently ignoring their own actions.
How can you say that? You were willing to harm me and Alice for money. I saw through all your wicked schemes, you greedy devils.
For a moment, Aaron seemed a bit intimidated by Robert's condemnation, but he quickly smirked.
Well, so what if you can walk? It's 2 against 1. Do you really think you can escape?
He wasn't wrong. There was no way a man in his 60s could overpower his son. Even if he wasn't physically disabled, he wouldn't stand a chance against an attack. Aaron moved closer to Robert, wielding the metal bat. Although they were shocked by the fact that he could walk, it didn't seem like they had any intention of abandoning their plan. Robert was in real danger. Feeling helpless, I watched the monitor, completely glued to the scene. But then I noticed something. There was a red light flickering through the living room window. Soon after, several police officers burst into the living room. The red light I had seen earlier was the flashing light from a police car. Caught off guard by the sudden arrival of the police, both Aaron and Carol panicked. The officers assessed the situation and immediately restrained Aaron and Carol, who were both holding weapons.
Why are the police here?
Let me go. I haven't done anything.
The two of them struggled, trying to escape, but the police weren't about to let them get away.
I had already called the police. Alice is being protected in the basement, so you couldn't harm her. Your plan has failed too bad.
Damn it! You sold out your own family.
You were the ones who betrayed me first. Reflect on that while you're behind bars.
You bastard.
Aaron broke free from the police's hold and tried to punch his dad, but he was quickly subdued again.
We're arresting you both for attempted murder.
The police put handcuffs on the two of them. Carol began sobbing softly in shock. Aaron and his mom seemed to realize it was over for them, and they slumped in resignation. After a while, Robert opened the basement door for me. Apparently, Aaron and Carol had been taken away in a police car.
It's all over now, Alice. I'm truly sorry for putting you through such a frightening experience.
Robert apologized to me. Please don't apologize. If you hadn't saved me, who knows what would have happened to me? If he hadn't hidden me in the basement, I would have been attacked by Aaron and Carol. I would have likely lost my life.
They started acting strangely after they learned your father was wealthy. They wanted to kill you and inherit your fortune. It's truly pathetic.
After the accident, Robert had undergone rehabilitation and regained his ability to walk without a wheelchair. But he had pretended to still be injured to deceive Aaron and Carol and make them let their guard down. His cold attitude towards me was also an act to make Aaron and Carol believe he was on their side, so they would include him in their plans. Thinking they had him on their side, they had revealed part of their plan to him.
But I didn't expect them to push you to the point of a stomach ulcer. I'm sorry. If I hadn't done that, they wouldn't have trusted me, so I had to act cold.
With that, Robert apologized once again for everything that had happened. I honestly thought you hated me, and I felt so down. But to think there was a reason behind it all, I'm the one who should apologize for not realizing.
You don't need to apologize. It was all my failure to keep things under control. I almost put you in real danger.
Apparently, Robert had realized fairly early on that Aaron and Carol were targeting my life. He had been waiting for the right moment to ensure they would be caught by the police in the act. I'm planning to visit Aaron soon. I know I could just leave it and never see him again, but I really want to give him a piece of my mind.
I see. You definitely have the right to confront him. Just be careful.
A few days later, I visited the detention center where Aaron was being held. Why did you do something so stupid?
It's your fault. Why did you hide the fact that your dad was rich? That's just not right.
My dad's wealth has nothing to do with me. Thanks to you, I was able to reconcile with him, but I guess it was all just for the money.
Of course it was. Why do you think I was so nice to you? You got a huge inheritance after the funeral. As your husband, I deserve my share. If you had just handed it over, none of this would have happened.
Hearing such a selfish excuse, I regretted coming and sighed deeply. Too bad, but your plan was doomed from the start. My dad's entire estate was donated to a children's care facility according to his will.
No way. You must have inherited the properties and assets. Don't lie.
I turned it down. I suggested donating it because I didn't need it. My dad had told me he intended to leave everything to me. But I thought his enormous wealth could serve a greater purpose in the world than just going to me. So, I asked for all of it to be donated. My dad was quite surprised, but knowing my stubborn personality, he eventually respected my wishes.
How stupid. You threw away enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Stop acting like some self-righteous saint.
He was the kind of person who had no qualms about hurting others for his own gain. Aaron clearly couldn't comprehend my actions at all. Someone as selfish as you would never understand. I gave up the inheritance because I realized I could be happy without money. That's why I didn't tell you. I never imagined it would lead to all of this.
Damn it. Then what the hell did I ruin my life for?
Everything was your own fault. You should think long and hard about the stupidity of chasing a non-existent fortune. Well then, goodbye.
Hey, wait. Alice. Hey.
I ignored Aaron's call to stop and left the room. I would never see Aaron again. The thought made me feel refreshed. Later, Aaron and Carol were prosecuted for attempted murder. Aaron and Carol apparently refused to admit their wrongdoings until the end. but Robert had secretly installed a security camera in the living room and submitted the footage to the police, which served as strong evidence. Furthermore, Aaron was also arrested for embezzling money from his company, and it seemed he wouldn't be able to avoid a lengthy prison sentence. Eventually, I received letters of apology from Aaron and Carol, supposedly to get a reduced sentence, but they were filled with self-serving excuses. Disgusted, I tore the letters up without even replying. Afterward, I hired a lawyer and officially divorced Aaron. Since Robert sold the houses and the land along with them, Aaron and Carol would have nowhere to return to once they got out in a few years. Imagining the bewildered expressions they'd have at that moment gave me a sense of satisfaction. Both Robert and I moved to a distant place. It was to ensure that Aaron or Carol wouldn't be able to harm us if they were ever released. I regularly go to check on Robert.
I can manage on my own. You don't have to worry about me.
Robert always said that out of concern for me, but there was no way I could ignore the man who had saved my life. Please don't say that. I want to be good to you in place of my late dad.
Alice, thank you.
At first, Robert seemed embarrassed whenever I visited, but eventually, as my feelings reached him, he began to openly express his gratitude. Later, I started a new job in the place I moved to, and I ended up getting engaged to a coworker I met there. I invited Robert to my wedding and introduced him to my future husband as the person who had saved my life. Even now, as I build a new family, my relationship with Robert continues. If he hadn't deceived Aaron and Carol and saved me that day, I wouldn't be experiencing this happiness now. Though I came to understand the fear of people blinded by money, I also gained a respectable person like Robert in my life. Now, I am carrying a new life inside me. After my baby is born, I plan to visit Robert and introduce him to the newest member of our family.
My name is Emily Anderson, and I'm 42 years old. One evening, I suddenly got a call from my husband's aunt, Mary, who is my father-in-law's sister. It was the news that my in-laws had passed away in a tragic car accident. To make matters worse, my husband Alex was away on a 2-week business trip abroad. I hurriedly tried to call him, but no matter how many times I tried, he wouldn't pick up. What should I do? I need to head to the hospital right away. When I arrived at the hospital, the siblings and relatives of my in-laws had already gathered.
Emily, we've been waiting for you. Oh, isn't Alex with you?
Well, actually, he's on a business trip abroad. I've been trying to reach him, but he's not answering. Oh, but let me try again. I made another call.
Hello.
Oh, you finally picked up? Alex, actually.
I told you not to call me. This is an important business trip.
I'm sorry, but this is even more important.
Nothing is more important than this deal. Don't call me again.
His angry voice echoed through the quiet hospital hallway, even though the call wasn't on speaker. He hung up on me after cutting off my words and venting his frustration. He said it's an important deal and hung up on me.
Well, how about trying to call his office tomorrow? If they call him, he'll probably listen to them.
Oh, that's a good idea. I'll call first thing tomorrow. At the suggestion of one of the relatives, we decided to inform Alex of his parents' death through his company. The next day, amidst all the hectic events, I finally managed to call his office. However, I learned something shocking during that call. Hello, I'm Emily Anderson, Alex's wife. I'm afraid my in-laws passed away in an accident, and I'd like the company to let him know since he's abroad for business. I think he'll pick up if it's a call from work.
Business trip abroad? Actually, your husband is on an extended vacation.
Excuse me? What do you mean? He's not on his business trip abroad?
No, ma'am. We don't even have any overseas business trips at our company.
I couldn't hide my shock at such an unexpected response. Not a business trip abroad, but on vacation?
What the heck? What's going on? He's not on a business trip? So where is he now?
The main mourner missing? This is unbelievable. What am I supposed to tell the guests? We haven't even finalized the funeral plans.
That idiot. What the heck is he doing?
We have to notify the funeral service by 4 p.m. today. What should we do? As the time limit drew closer, everyone began to get frustrated. That's when Alex's cousin, Lucas, who was close to him, spoke up.
Well, Alex is in Montana right now.
What? Montana. Why would he be there? And how do you know this?
Well, sorry. He told me to keep it a secret.
Who's he with?
Well, I think he said it was someone from his work.
Don't tell me it's Irene.
Well.
Of course. While we were informing relatives about my in-laws' deaths, my sister, Irene, was unreachable. When I asked my parents, they told me she had gone on a trip to Montana with her kids. I couldn't believe it when I heard Lucas's story, but after thoroughly questioning him, we discovered that Alex and Irene were having an affair. I couldn't believe they had gone on a trip together to Montana, and that their relationship had been going on for 3 to 4 years. I had never suspected a thing.
What a disgraceful man. And to betray Emily like that, he's an absolute scoundrel.
I couldn't bear the unexpected betrayal of the two, and without caring about the timing, tears began to pour uncontrollably. Seeing me like that, Alex's aunt and the other relatives said,
That's right. Since there's no main mourner, let's hold a grand ceremony to honor the deceased. We can't let that scumbag get Chris's inheritance. Let's just use it all up right now.
And so, with her's outlandish idea, we decided to punish Alex. 2 weeks later, Alex returned home in high spirits.
I'm back. Man, I'm so tired. The jet lag is terrible.
Jet lag, huh? I handed him the divorce papers I had prepared. Here you go.
Huh? What's this?
Silence.
A divorce? Why all of a sudden?
Maybe because it was after his affair trip, Alex's face twisted in confusion as he grew nervous. You cheated with Irene, didn't you?
Huh?
Alex tried to brush it off with a nervous laugh, but I continued. Don't bother trying to hide it. I know everything.
Wait, did Irene tell you? Or was it Lucas?
Does it really matter where I heard it? What were you thinking, having an affair with my sister?
It was just a few times. You know how people say they lost control? I realized it was bad and stopped seeing her. I swear, Emily and our son, John, are the most important to me. It's all in the past. Can you forgive me?
John is our 10-year-old son. Were you even listening? I said I know everything. Do you really think you can just get away with this? That I'm just going to say, oh well, it's fine. Are you an idiot?
Geez.
So that trip to Montana, was it with Irene? You even lied about going on a business trip abroad. That's pretty bold of you.
Gosh.
You told me not to call because you knew if I called, I'd find out you were still in the country.
Damn it.
So, how long has it been going on with Irene? I heard it's been a while.
A year? Maybe a year ago.
Didn't I just tell you I know everything? It's been going on for 4 or 5 years, right?
How do you know all that? Damn it, Lucas.
Don't blame others.
I keep telling you, It was just a lapse in judgment. You're the one I love. It's just that her daughter was so cute.
Daughter, not niece.
I felt bad that she didn't have a father. I just wanted her to enjoy life. Can't you understand that?
Wait a minute. You keep saying daughter, but Irene's child is your niece, isn't she?
Oh, crap.
Seriously?
Did I just say something I shouldn't have? I mean, you said you knew everything.
I didn't know that. Is that even true? Are you seriously telling me Irene's daughter is yours and not from her previous marriage?
Well, yeah.
Are you kidding me? You had an affair and even had a child with her, and now you're telling me you still love me? That's beyond shameless. Alex is bad enough, but my sister is even worse. She betrayed me, her own flesh and blood, without a second thought, and carried on the affair for a long time. Since Alex and Irene work at the same company, I knew they were close. But I always thought it was because they were in-laws and colleagues. Both my parents and I were completely deceived, but more than feeling anger or regret, we were filled with disgust and contempt. You and Irene will both be held accountable, but we'll discuss that later. For now, there are more important things to deal with, and we have guests.
Guests?
I called in his aunt who had been waiting in the other room.
Oh, Alex, long time no see. How was your trip to Montana?
Alex looked confused as he noticed all the relatives gathered.
What's going on with everyone here?
We've got something important to talk about.
Something important.
Well, while you were gone, your parents were both killed in a car accident.
You're kidding. When did it happen?
The day after you left.
Emily, why didn't you tell me such an important thing?
I tried calling you so many times. You're the one who hung up on me. Then I called your office, and that's when I found out you weren't on a business trip abroad, but on vacation. That's also how I learned about your affair with Irene.
You called my office? You had no right to do that.
Alex, this is your fault for not answering during such an important time.
So, what about the funeral? What happened with that?
The funeral? It's long over.
We made it into a grand ceremony. Oh, but the main mourner was absent.
God damn.
Everyone thought it was suspicious.
Alex looked embarrassed and said, "Sorry, I'll take care of the rest." But everyone scolded him. Of course you will.
Alex, you should be grateful to Emily. Even after learning the truth, she took care of everything as your wife, arranging the funeral and handling everything on her own.
As Alex's only wife, I had far too much to handle, and to be honest, I didn't even have time to mourn my in-laws. My mind was on the verge of breaking down. If it hadn't been for the help of his aunt and others, I might have been paralyzed by grief and unable to do anything. Thank you all so much. It was only possible with your support. But it really turned out to be a beautiful service, didn't it?
Yes, I'm sure both Chris and Laura are smiling from heaven. I wonder how many hundreds of people came to the party.
A party?
Yes, we made it a big event to honor your dad, who was a jazz musician.
I'm not sure I get it, but it sounds like you had fun.
Oh, it was very fun. Would you like to hear all about it? After all, as the main mourner, you're the one paying for everything. You should know what went down.
What?
The look on Alex's face was priceless. Just thinking about it makes me laugh. Then we began recounting the story of the grand funeral we held without him. We held the funeral for both in-laws together, as they were a couple who had always been close. My father-in-law, a well-known jazz musician in the country, and my mother-in-law, a former flight attendant trainer, had wide social circles, and more than 400 people attended their funeral. Since so many people showed up, we wanted to honor the deceased and hand out expensive thank you gifts to all the guests to reduce Alex's inheritance. Now, you might think that's disrespectful to the deceased, but in reality, Alex's parents had no intention of leaving him an inheritance anyway. But I'll explain that more later. I'm sure both of them are laughing up there in the sky.
What do you mean by thank you gifts?
We gave a thank you gift to everyone who came to pay their respects at the funeral.
How much did you spend on these?
Alex, clearly shrinking at the thought of footing the entire bill, asked nervously. It's $30 a person. We got $30 worth of fancy pastry boxes from the funeral home.
Oh, it was only $30 per person.
Wait, you think $30 is cheap? We prepared 500 boxes, assuming there would be over 400 attendees.
500? So that means $30 times 500.
Yes, that's right.
That's $15,000?
Yes, exactly.
There must have been extras, right? Can't we return the leftovers?
Oh, it's too late for that. We had about 50 left, but we just ate the rest ourselves.
That sweet was really delicious, wasn't it?
It really was. The cream inside just melted in your mouth.
You idiots! How could you waste $15,000 on just some extra sweet?
Well, it's not like we had much choice. You didn't answer any of Emily's calls, so there was no way to consult with you. Besides, your parents were important people, and even though they've passed, we couldn't let them lose face, could we?
So, what was the total cost, including the ceremony?
The ceremony, with all the options, cost about $12,000. Then the return gifts were about $15,000. And now, the extra thank you gifts cost another $15,000. So in total, $42,000. Oh wait, was that before tax? If it was before tax, the total might be closer to $50,000. Haha. Alex was completely shell-shocked. He looked like a robot that had shut down. Hey, are you even listening?
Come on, this is unbelievable. How could you go ahead with all of this without consulting me?
Because you didn't answer your phone, remember?
But Uncle Tom, there's got to be some restraint.
You idiot! You have an illegitimate child with your mistress, you skipped your own parents' funeral, and you're talking about restraint? You're the one without any.
Well.
Oh, and that's not the only surprise.
Surprise? Mary.
What do you mean surprise? Please, just stop.
Well, actually, some of your dad's friends suggested hosting a farewell party for his fans. You know your dad was popular, right? A lot of his fans were probably devastated by his sudden death. They thought a party to celebrate his life would be the perfect way to say goodbye.
And then?
His friends were all for it too. They were excited to do a jam session of his greatest hits. How could we turn that down?
And did you do it?
Of course.
That's something you should have waited for me to come back for. You could have held the farewell party anytime.
Well, the musicians were on tour, so the only available date was last week.
This is insane. Absolutely unreal.
Actually, the real story was a little different. The real conversation between my father-in-law's friend Mike and I went like this.
Are you planning a farewell party for his fans? I'm sure both he and his fans would love it.
Oh, that's a wonderful idea. Knowing Chris's personality, I'm sure he'd be thrilled.
Great, then leave the party to us. We'll handle everything, including the costs, so it won't be any trouble for your family.
Wait, hold on a second. My husband, Alex, who is their son, will cover all the costs. But in exchange, we'd like to hold the party next weekend.
Next weekend? Well, I guess that's fine, but okay, sure.
Thank you. Even though I threw them a curveball, they quickly posted the event on my father-in-law's website, invited musicians, and got the party preparations moving.
So how much did the party cost?
Alex, how many times do we have to tell you? You're in no position to take that tone with Emily. You were off on an affair while your parents were being laid to rest.
Geez, you're an annoying Auntie Mary.
Did you say something?
No, nothing.
Anyway, Alex, aren't you even a little curious about what happened at the party?
I don't care. Just tell me how much it cost.
Since Alex clearly didn't want to hear about the party, let me explain. Despite the short notice, nearly 1,000 people showed up. We prepared a variety of party foods and champagne for the guests, while musicians who were my father-in-law's friends performed his greatest hits, allowing everyone to reminisce about my in-laws. Some people placed flowers in front of the photos, while others listened to the musicians' performances, each honoring the deceased in their own way. As we had announced on the website, we asked guests not to bring money or gifts, only flowers. I hate to say it myself, but organizing the funeral, booking the party venue, and handling all the preparations in such a short time really made me feel proud of what I accomplished. As for the total cost, well, the musicians, who were friends of my father-in-law, refused to accept any payment, including equipment costs. The venue, drinks, and foods totaled $50,000. Of course, the contract was all in Alex's name. Do you just want to know the total cost?
Yeah, just tell me now.
$50,000.
That's $50,000 too? And is that including tax?
Alex was probably so numb to everything at that point. The only thing he was worried about in a situation like this was whether the cost was before or after tax. Not only me, but his aunt and the other relatives were also doing their best to hold back their laughter.
So, that's a total of $100,000. Do I even have that kind of money? If I get divorced after this, I'm finished.
Divorce? Oh, of course we're getting divorced. Don't expect any sympathy from me.
Yeah, I figured.
You could almost hear a whoosh sound, like air leaking out of Alex, just like in an anime. Hey, you know, even though you're the one who has to pay, you're aware there's an inheritance, right?
The inheritance. Right, I'll just use that to cover it.
Hearing this, Alex perked up, and he began talking with the other relatives about the future plans. Later, we officially divorced. Since I had already consulted a lawyer before Alex returned, the process of dividing assets and discussing alimony didn't take more than 2 weeks to settle. I was feeling a bit sentimental, thinking about starting a new life with just my son, when I suddenly got a panicked call from Alex.
Emily, please help me.
What's wrong? Why are you so flustered?
I don't have enough money for the burial ceremony. Since we have to bury them separately, it's going to cost about $5,000 to $6,000. Please, just this once, lend me some money.
How do you not have any money? Didn't you receive $100,000 in the asset division? And I haven't even gotten the alimony yet. What did you spend it all on?
I paid the funeral home and the party venue right after that. Andy said, your parents had a reputation to uphold, so don't be stingy and pay everything in full right now. They wouldn't leave me alone about it.
That sounds exactly like Mary. So, were the funeral costs before or after tax?
With tax included, but that's not important right now. I went to the bank to withdraw from my parents' inheritance, and the account's frozen.
Oh, right. I had the account frozen, didn't I?
They said with the inheritance process, it'll take a little over a month before I can withdraw the money. That won't be in time for the burial ceremony.
I didn't even need to contact the bank myself, but out of spite after hearing about his affair, I had them freeze Alex's accounts. And I had totally forgotten about it. Oh, really? That's tough. What a problem. Why don't you borrow the money from Irene?
Huh? You won't lend it to me?
Of course not. You and I are no longer related. I was really close to your parents, but you're nothing to me. If I saw you in a supermarket, I wouldn't even nod. I can't lend money to someone like that.
What the hell? That's harsh. Fine, whatever.
I don't know what happened after that, but just when I thought I was finally free from all the chaos, Alex called again, over and over.
Emily, why is my parents' inheritance only $100,000? My dad was a famous musician and mom was a former flight attendant. There's no way they only had $100,000. You must have withdrawn money before you had the account frozen, right?
Don't accuse me of something like that. Even if I did, it would be discovered during the inheritance process. I'm not some kind of thief. Well, I did check the balance before freezing it.
So then why is that all there is?
Didn't you know? Your parents had been sending $30,000 every year for John's education.
What?
Oh, you didn't know? I thought for sure you did. Of course, Alex didn't know. His parents had made sure to keep it a secret from him. It was about 10 years ago, right after I gave birth to John, their first grandchild. Alex's parents were overjoyed and suddenly said something unexpected.
Emily, thank you so much for giving us such a beautiful grandson.
Given how Alex is, we never thought we'd see the day we'd have a grandchild.
And well, there's something we've been talking about for years.
What?
Alex has always been careless with money. Even when we gave him an allowance as a kid, he blew it all in one day. That didn't change as he got older. There were times he spent his whole paycheck and asked me to lend him money.
Really? Oh no, did I really marry someone like that?
So we decided that if Alex ever got married and had kids, we'd use all our savings for our grandchild.
Emily, you're such a good person. You're bright, observant, and you've gotten along with everyone in the family so well. You're also incredibly responsible. We trust you with our wishes.
Wait, I'm not sure I understand.
Well, to put it simply, we're not planning to leave Alex any inheritance. We want it all to go toward our grandchild's education.
But if Alex inherits the money, wouldn't it naturally go to that purpose?
Oh, Emily, you're too sweet. Alex would blow it on something ridiculous, like a boat.
Wait, really? This is starting to sound a little scary.
It's not that we don't love him. It's because we know how he is that we can't give him the money. We're doing this because we care about him. If we hand over the money, it'll ruin him. That's why we're entrusting it to you, Emily.
Thank you, but what will Alex say?
You can't tell him. He'll throw a tantrum like a little kid.
My in-laws were a bit forceful, but I was truly grateful for their generous offer. From that point on, they deposited $30,000 into John's account every year on his birthday.
$30,000 every year? So how much is in John's account now?
Well, after taxes, it's a little over $250,000.
What? That's my inheritance. That money belongs to me.
No, your parents specifically said they weren't leaving you any inheritance because you're too reckless with money. They wanted it to be used for John's education.
There's no way my dad said that. You're stealing it, aren't you?
Sure, if you don't believe me, why don't you ask the bank to issue you a statement?
Wait a minute. Even with what's in the bank, there's only about $400,000 total. That doesn't add up.
Alex, you really don't know anything, do you? Your parents donated about $300,000 to some organization. They said they were using the remaining $300,000 for their own enjoyment. The $100,000 left is what's remaining from that. Alex's parents had been very involved in end-of-life planning, especially his dad, who, being a musician, had this bizarre slogan about having a stylish and rebellious exit from life.
I'm not going to use up $1 million in the rest of my life. So let's share the wealth and spread happiness.
That's how they'd been distributing their assets well before they passed. By now, you've probably gathered that Alex isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. For better or worse, this is something he inherited from his dad. But while his dad was charming, playful, and had a great sense of style, Alex is, well, just foolish.
So wait, does that mean I'm not getting any inheritance at all?
Yeah, pretty much. And considering all the small expenses, you will be in debt.
Oh no.
The price of infidelity is high, isn't it?
What does that have to do with the inheritance?
Oh, nothing really. And with that, my revenge on my clueless, sleazy ex-husband was complete. But I couldn't forget about my sister's punishment. So, I took a bold step and called her ex-husband.
Oh, it's been a while, Emily. Why did we divorce? It was her infidelity. She had affairs with several men, and she wasn't even sure whose child it was.
Wait, there were others besides Alex.
I wanted a DNA test, but she refused. Even now, I still miss my daughter. Whether or not she's biologically mine, I wanted to raise her, but I just couldn't forgive Irene.
Of course, you couldn't. I didn't want to hurt my former brother-in-law, Ryan, any more than he already was, so I kept quiet about Alex being one of the potential fathers. But now I had uncovered a new piece of information, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. Still, I didn't want to do anything that would hurt my parents, so I needed to find a way to keep the punishment from reaching them. That's when I decided to call Alex again. Hey, Alex.
Hey, what's up? Miss me already? Want to get back together? Well, I guess I can't blame you.
Actually, I found out something new. Want to know or not?
What's this all of a sudden?
Irene's daughter might not even be your child.
Wait, did you seriously call just to tell me that? I already know she's either my kid or her ex-husband's. Big deal.
No, you don't get it. There's another possible father. Ryan told me, so it's legit.
Are you kidding me? I've been played this whole time? What a slut!
Well, you too. With that, I felt my punishment for my sister was complete. This news would completely wreck whatever was left between Irene and Alex. This rumor will probably spread as far as Africa. As expected, Irene's behavior spread throughout the company, and she ended up quitting because of it. And as for that idiot Alex, everyone at the office figured out his involvement, and he became the subject of cold stares from everyone. 5 years have passed since then. John is turning 16 this year. Thanks to the money his grandparents left him, he was able to get into a prestigious private high school. I've since remarried and am enjoying a happy, peaceful life. Alex, on the other hand, hasn't changed a bit. While he still pays child support and alimony on time, without me managing the finances, he spends most of his paycheck the day he gets it. Our son once told me about a visit to Alex's place.
Dad said, "Tonight's a feast," so I got excited. But all we had was instant noodles and some fried chicken from Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Well, at least they seem to be having fun spending time together as father and son. As for Irene, she's still the same. She seems to still be hunting for men to rely on for her livelihood. Since then, I haven't spoken to Irene once, and I have no intention of ever speaking to her again. Our parents are troubled by the rift between us, but I've chosen to stay silent. Every year, I make sure to visit my in-laws' graves. Knowing them, they're probably laughing themselves silly watching the comedy that's become our lives.
What's the point of getting all worked up over marrying a high school dropout?
My sister, who claims to be an elite, spoke in a triumphant voice. Ever since I introduced my fiancé to her, she has been insulting him. But I've reached my limit. You better not regret it once you know the truth. I'm Catherine. I'm 29 and about to marry my fiancé. Life will change a lot after getting married. I quit my job at the trading company and am now preparing for the wedding. My fiancé, Tom, is a very gentle person. He gets along well with my parents too. I think it's largely because Tom and I met through my dad's work. My dad is the president of a small but beloved local business.
Thanks to the support of the local folks, our business runs smoothly.
That's my dad's favorite phrase, and I respect him for it.
I never thought Tom would end up marrying my daughter.
Seeing my dad mutter with a happy smile doubles the joy of the wedding. It's supposed to be the springtime of my life, but...
Catherine, are you there?
My parents are both at work during weekdays. The sound of footsteps echoed through the houses where only I was home alone. Hi, Julia.
There you are. It's been a while.
Julia, my sister, suddenly appeared at our house in the quiet afternoon. My sister, 2 years younger than me, lives alone away from our parents' house.
This house is so old-fashioned. Dad's a president, so he should spend some money on remodeling.
Julia threw her bag on the couch and looked around the living room in annoyance. Mom and Dad are both practical people. Besides, it's not even 20 years old yet.
You're stingy too, sis.
Julia scrunched her face in annoyance as usual. She has always loved flashy, glamorous things. When she was little, she'd demand frequent overseas trips or brand-name clothes. As she grew, she insisted on attending an all-girls private middle and high school just because she liked the uniforms, putting our parents in a tough spot. We weren't exactly struggling for money, but our family had a practical approach to finances. So, at first, my parents opposed sending Julia to a private school with incredibly high tuition and uniform costs. But as soon as they said no, Julia started crying and throwing a fit. In the end, our parents agreed, not wanting the houses destroyed.
You should have just listened to me in the first place.
Seeing Julia perk up instantly after getting their approval really surprised me. Who did she inherit that from? Seeing Julia sitting around in flashy clothes, even now makes me wonder.
Huh? What are you talking about?
No, nothing. Just talking to myself.
You sound so old.
Julia exaggeratedly pinched her nose, looking entirely relaxed. Julia, did you come for a reason today?
Oh, yeah. So, I heard you're getting married? What's your fiancé like?
Julia leaned in, her eyes gleaming with mischief. What do you mean, what's he like? He's just a normal guy.
What college did he graduate from?
Without missing a beat, Julia fired her question, and I almost burst out laughing, thinking, there it is. After attending the private all-girls school, she went on to a prestigious private college. She's incredibly proud of her education. Every time she meets someone, she has to ask, where did you graduate from? It's almost a hobby, asking about people's backgrounds just to show off.
So, which university did your fiancé graduate from?
Annoyed at my reluctance to answer, she asked again, her frustration mounting. My fiancé didn't graduate from college. Julia gasped dramatically at my answer.
What? He dropped out of college?
No, not exactly.
Huh? What do you mean? Don't tell me.
My fiancé, Tom's highest level of education is high school. But he's...
No way. I can't believe it.
Without even hearing me out, Julia screamed. What's the point of lying about something like this? So, he's a high school graduate, but...
I've never even seen a high school grad before. I can't believe it. No way. I kinda want to meet one now.
Ignoring what I was saying, Julia kept making a fuss on her own, which irritated me a bit. But I gave up on the conversation, knowing it was typical of her. All right. My fiance's education has nothing to do with you, Julia.
Yes, it does. It totally does. My boyfriend and I are elites. I mean, we're intellectual leaders.
Julia, all riled up, compared her boyfriend, whom she met in college, and tried to use some fancy words. Intellectual leaders? Do you even know what that means?
Well, I mean, people like my boyfriend and me are called intellectual leaders.
And what kind of people are those? Trying to quiet my annoyingly loud sister by digging deeper, as expected, she got tongue-tied.
The details don't matter. Anyway, we're super important and really smart people.
I couldn't help but laugh at Julia's incredibly immature explanation.
You're always nitpicking over every little thing. The point is, my boyfriend and I went to a prestigious private college, and there's no way I'll accept having a high school grad in the family.
Julia crossed her arms, fuming. As I was about to argue back at her rudeness, she suddenly seemed to think of something, and then quickly switched to a calmer attitude.
Well, whatever. Anyway, I'm glad I got to see you. Later.
And just like when she arrived, she left suddenly. What's her deal? She's still like a tornado. I was relieved for the moment and went back to preparing for the wedding I was looking forward to, not giving much thought to why Julia, who never backs down, left so easily. And then the weekend arrived. It was the day for the wedding planning meeting that I'd been looking forward to. My fiancé, Tom, and I were meeting directly at the church where the ceremony would take place. The church where we were getting married was a historic site, with the building listed as a historic church. The moment you stepped inside, The place's historic presence and the pure atmosphere made you want to stand up straight. I can't believe we get to have our wedding here. It feels like a dream. From behind me, I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel.
Hey, Catherine.
My fiancé, Tom, called out to me with a smile. Tom, thanks for taking the time, even though I know weekends are busy for you.
It's our special wedding, Catherine. Everyone was happy to let me take time off.
Hand in hand, Tom and I headed toward the office where the planner was waiting. Like every couple getting married, Tom and I poured our own touches into the ceremony. We planned to hold the ceremony in the church and then have the reception in a charming hall within the grounds. Both were high-class buildings, so we carefully selected sophisticated white gowns, colored dresses, bouquets, and more to match the elegance. And there was the food, wedding cake, table flowers. We wanted our guests to enjoy it too, so we made all our choices with great care. Ugh, but all the colored dresses are so gorgeous. Maybe I'll just layer them all.
That could work. It'd be quite a sight, like a peacock.
Tom, I was joking. You could at least laugh. Tom, a little clueless but incredibly gentle, never complained, no matter how long it took me to make a decision.
You let me pick the venue, so I want everything else to be just the way you want it.
Hearing that made me feel all the more sure I wanted to spend my life with Tom. That was how our meeting, which had been smooth and peaceful, suddenly became clouded.
There you are. Knew I'd find you.
Oh, is that your sister and her high school grad fiance?
I turned at the sound of loud footsteps and chatter to find Julia and a man I didn't recognize. Julia, what are you doing here?
I thought I'd come to support you during the wedding planning.
How do you even know when and where the meeting is? When I asked, stunned, Julia just laughed.
When I was at the house the other day, your planner was open on the table, and it was written right there.
Darn it. I deeply regretted it. I'd left all the wedding papers and my planner out on the living room table, forgetting about Julia's nosiness. So who is this guy? I had a pretty good idea, but I asked about the neatly groomed man standing next to Julia.
This is my boyfriend. I mean, fiancé, Richard.
Nice to meet you, Catherine.
Hearing this man in an expensive-looking suit and an annoyingly smug smile call me Catherine caught me off guard. When did you get engaged?
Right after I visited home the other day. When I saw the venue brochures, I wanted to get married too.
You decided something like that on a whim? When she wants to do something, she acts immediately. I was dizzy from Julia's astonishing drive, and her fiancé, Richard, smirked confidently.
Well, for elites like us, oops, I mean intellectual leaders, getting married is as easy as pie.
Hearing that, I knew he was definitely Julia's boyfriend. Someone who always talks about being an elite or having a prestigious education is just the kind of person Julia would get along with. I also understood why Julia had suddenly started using terms like intellectual leaders. She must have learned the term intellectual leaders from her fiancé and started using it to sound more impressive.
So, I'm also getting married at this church.
What? I was reflecting on them, but then Julia's words caught me off guard. It might be nice for sisters to use the same venue, but you'll pick a different date, right? Like a year later.
No way. I don't want to go after you, so I'll have my wedding before yours.
What are you talking about? Seeing me speechless, Julia laughed.
I mean, you're marrying a high school grad, right? There's no way I'm having my wedding after someone who settled for that.
What? Tom gently touched my shaking shoulder to calm me down.
Hey, both of you, calm down.
Oh, sorry, high school grad. We totally ignored you.
Despite being my fiancé, Julia clearly had no intention of being polite or even giving a proper greeting. But Tom responded to Julia's behavior with courtesy.
Nice to meet you. I'm Tom, Catherine's fiancé. So Julia, you're having your wedding before ours. But did you manage to get a reservation?
Julia looked down at gentle Tom and laughed smugly.
There's a waiting list. Just happened that a spot opened up a week before your date.
Yeah, checking if any good dates have cancellations is just common sense when choosing a venue.
Richard laughed along, a smirk plastered across his face. But Tom simply tilted his head slightly, looking puzzled.
Oh, a cancellation, huh? Well, in that case, I guess you can book it.
Tom mumbled as if to himself, and Julia and Richard laughed mockingly.
Your fiancé is just like I imagined, sis, kinda clueless, typical high school grad.
Hey, since you're a high school grad, you don't know calculus, right? Try saying sine, cosine, tangent.
I glared at Julia and Richard, who were laughing loudly and obnoxiously. That's enough. If you keep making a scene, get out. Julia saw me fuming with anger and exaggeratedly shrugged her shoulders.
Whoa, looks like you're getting cold feet about marrying a high school grad, huh, sis?
Don't marry out of desperation, Catherine.
I was exhausted from dealing with these two who wouldn't listen to reason. I had nothing more to say.
Well then, time to get what I came here for today.
Julia, still cheerful, started taking pictures of the wedding planning documents on the desk.
What are you doing? These are important documents for our wedding.
Tom tried to stop her, but Julia pushed him aside and continued taking photos.
I don't have much time until my wedding. You get that, right?
Julia's strange remark made me step closer to her. What do you mean? Why does having little time mean you need to take pictures of our documents?
It's too much trouble to plan everything from scratch, so I'm gonna copy yours.
Once again, I was at a loss for words. Is it possible to be left speechless this often in one's life?
This bouquet design looks nice too. And you're ordering the table flowers from here as well, huh?
The wedding cake is so stylish. Much more fitting for me, a graduate of a prestigious intellectual leaders-only university, than for some high school grad groom.
Satisfied, Julia and Richard left noisily, just as they had arrived. This can't be. Getting married with the same decorations a week before us. This has to be a joke.
I think it's true that they're getting married at the church a week before us, but maybe they'll only use us as a reference.
Tom and I still wanted to believe that even those two could distinguish between right and wrong. I was used to being at the mercy of Julia's whims from way back. I felt bad for Tom, but I decided to let Julia and Richard have their wedding a week before ours. I also started thinking about how I needed to apologize to our relatives for the added burden of two sisters having weddings so close together. I got a call from a floral artist I found on social media who specializes in weddings. What? You got an order for the exact same design 1 week before my wedding. I had asked that artist to create a carefully designed bouquet and table flowers for my wedding. And because they received an order for the same design a week before my date, they called to confirm if it was a prank. Was the order placed by someone named Julia? I hesitantly asked over the phone, and the answer was yes. No way. A terrible feeling washed over me, and I quickly called the boutique where I had arranged to rent my wedding dress. Sure enough, every piece I was supposed to rent had been reserved by Julia for her wedding, 1 week before mine. I also called the bakery where I had ordered the wedding cake, and an order for the exact same cake had been placed for a week before my wedding. That girl. I can't believe she really copied everything. Fueled by anger, I called Julia.
Hello?
Julia answered immediately, her carefree voice only making me angrier from the start. Julia, did you copy our entire wedding plan?
Yeah. I told you, I don't have time to come up with everything from scratch, so I'm just copying.
Julia didn't sound the least bit guilty, and I retorted in a firm tone. I'll let it go that you're having the wedding at the same church, but don't copy the plan that Tom and I worked so hard on. And Julia's wedding was 1 week before mine. With the same dress, bouquet, and wedding cake, it would be Tom and me who ended up embarrassed. As I spoke seriously, Julia laughed mockingly.
There's something I wanted to say to you too, sis. I tried ordering the same stuff, but don't you think you're spending a little too much on the wedding?
How could you say that? Besides, that's not true. I've set a budget and stuck to it.
That's fine, but those kinds of expenses aren't for someone marrying a high school grad. You'll have all kinds of expenses to deal with later, you know?
I could practically see Julia's smug face as she laughed over the phone. Seeing I was speechless with anger, Julia continued triumphantly.
Remember, a wedding isn't the finish line. You're marrying a high school grad, so your whole life will be full of sacrifices.
Why do you have to say that?
The wedding plan was perfect for us elites. I mean, intellectual leaders. If you don't want it to overlap, maybe you should consider a more modest venue and plan.
No way. There's a reason I can't give up the venue, and that plan was one that Tom and I put our hearts into. Before I could finish, Julia laughed happily, interrupting me.
What's the point of putting your heart into a marriage with a high school grad?
Julia, you. Before I could finish, Julia hung up on me, leaving me fuming as I paced around the living room for a while. Once I'd calmed down a bit, I called my fiancé, Tom.
Hey, what's going on?
Hearing Tom's gentle voice almost brought tears to my eyes. Tom, actually, Julia. I explained to Tom how Julia had copied every part of our wedding.
I see. Well, we can't just let this go.
Exactly. But what should we do?
How about we invite Julia and Richard to our next meeting with the planner?
What? And from there, we talked through our strategy over the phone. All right. I'm gonna make sure Julia regrets messing around with us like that. With a newfound determination, I hung up the phone, feeling completely different than when I had called. And then the day of our wedding planning meeting arrived.
Why did you call us here, huh? We're busy, you know.
Julia and her fiancé, Richard, were clearly annoyed at being summoned to the church office. We wanted to talk about you copying our entire wedding plan. I looked at the two of them calmly.
I told you already. We don't have time, so we're borrowing your ideas.
Exactly. That plan isn't suitable for marrying a high school grad anyway. So maybe you should have a more low-key wedding.
Seeing the two sitting smugly in their chairs, Tom and I decided to provoke them just a bit. This wedding plan was created for us. It suits us, and I think everyone will be happy.
Exactly. This is the result of us planning a ceremony that reflects who we are at this historic church.
As expected, Julia and Richard burst out laughing at our words.
A ceremony suitable for a high school grad? By the way, does your fiancé even have a real job, sis?
Yeah, I was wondering about that. What kind of work does a high school grad even do?
As the two laughed crudely, Tom replied calmly.
To put it simply, I help out with the family business.
Helping with the family business? You mean like housework?
Julia exaggeratedly pulled back, looking shocked. She then leaned into Richard, and they both started giggling.
I knew it. He's just a high school grad with barely any work experience.
Well, Julia made the right choice picking me, an elite. But your sister clearly doesn't know any better, marrying someone unemployed.
No matter how rude they got, neither Tom nor I were bothered. If anything, considering what was coming next, we were happy for them to keep going.
I do work as a proper member of society, you know.
When Tom smiled politely, Julia and Richard became even more smug.
Helping out around the house isn't a real job, you know. Understand? We, the intellectual leaders, are the ones keeping society going, and you're just a burden.
We're intellectual leaders, so we didn't know there were people like you who are practically the poster child of being a burden. So glad we're on the right side.
We, as intellectual leaders, would have never interacted with someone like you if not for this wedding making us family.
It's really a problem having a non-intellectual leader as a relative. I'd never want anything to do with a high school grad.
Exactly. Being related to intellectual leaders should be an association purely among intellectual leaders, for intellectual leaders, by intellectual leaders.
Julia and Richard were so hyped up that I lost track of what they were even saying. Ugh. I've heard the phrase intellectual leader so many times it's starting to lose all meaning. The moment I held my head in my hands, heavy footsteps echoed behind us.
What a disgrace, using such repulsive words. I'm ashamed of you, even as my daughter.
Dad.
Julia turned around, startled by the voice.
Why are you here, Dad?
Tom and I asked him to come. We wanted him to see how you and Richard were acting. I thought they might settle down now, but Julia and Richard were still going strong.
Perfect timing. Dad, did you know my Catherine's fiancé is a high school grad? Oh, and this is my fiancé, Richard, a graduate from a university exclusively for intellectual leaders. First time meeting him, right?
Nice to meet you, sir. I'm Richard, graduate of an intellectual leaders-only university. We'll be getting married at this church a week before Catherine, so please keep that in mind.
Richard greeted him with a smirk, and my dad's face twisted into a deep frown.
So, you're the one Julia chose. Ah, it's a pity, but I suppose you two are a perfect match. Even thinking that is disappointing.
Hey, Dad. What do you mean, disappointing? If anything, Catherine is the disappointing one.
Exactly. Your daughter is marrying an unemployed high school grad. How could anything be more disappointing than that?
Facing Julia and Richard, who still weren't giving up, my usually calm father raised his voice with a stern expression.
Stop calling Tom a high school grad and unemployed.
Julia was a bit intimidated by Dad's anger, but her stubborn nature wouldn't let her back down.
We're not saying anything wrong. Someone who only helps out around the house has no future. Even planning a wedding is audacious.
So, you're trying to ruin her wedding by copying everything?
Wait. How do you know about that?
It seemed like Julia wanted to keep the fact that she was copying our wedding a secret. Julia glared at me, but I wasn't scared anymore. I told Dad. It's something that affects Tom's reputation more than mine.
What does the reputation of an unemployed high school grad even matter?
It was my dad who finally lost his patience with Julia continuing to insult Tom.
That's enough. How dare you insult such a capable person as unemployed or a high school grad? Do you not know Tom's position?
Huh? Isn't he just helping around the house?
To not even know the difference between helping with a family business and housework. No, more importantly, Tom isn't just helping with the family business. He's the head of it.
Oh, really? What kind of family business is it? Some farm or something?
It's this very church you're standing in.
My dad's shout seemed to fly right over Julia and Richard's heads, as they just stared blankly.
Huh? What? What about this church?
I'm saying Tom is the head priest of this church. I spoke clearly so that even Julia and Richard could understand the reality of the situation.
What? A head priest is like super important.
Julia shouted, and Richard began to panic too.
How can a high school grad be the head of a church?
Seeing Richard use awkwardly formal speech with Tom, it seemed like he finally understood Tom's position. To make sure they really got it, I began explaining in detail. This church is a historic one, right? Tom was destined to inherit it from birth. Tom, standing beside me with a sheepish smile, added,
When I was in high school, we had a series of family losses, and I had to take over sooner than expected. That's why my education stopped after high school.
Wait. Don't you need some kind of qualifications to work at a church? I know that much.
Julia, still trying to find something to criticize, made a smug face. But Tom calmly continued his explanation.
Yes, to get my qualification at the seminary at the youngest possible age in my teens. I spent 2 years studying at a training center, living there full-time.
Huh? Seminary, what?
Julia and Richard had question marks floating all around their heads, but Tom continued speaking without concern.
To enter the training center, I needed a letter of recommendation and proof that I had the equivalent academic skills of a college graduate. So I took the high school equivalency exam at 18.
Huh? High school equiv. What now?
I was thoroughly fed up with these self-proclaimed elites who still seemed confused. In other words, Tom had the academic skills of a college graduate at just 18. He's an incredibly capable person. Get it?
Oh, wow. That's amazing. It's such an honor to have someone like that as my brother-in-law.
Richard quickly changed his tune, while beside him, Julia ground her teeth in frustration.
But working at a church must be easy, right? You're still beneath us intellectual leaders.
Julia, you're still saying that?
Trying to get the last word, Julia received an earful from Dad.
Tom is doing an excellent job as the head priest of this historic church, and our company has often relied on him. And you. All these disrespectful comments.
Standing in front of my father, who was trembling with anger, Julia still muttered, But. Ignoring Julia, Dad turned to Tom and bowed.
Tom, please forgive my daughter's rudeness. I promise that Julia will not be allowed near this church again. You have my word.
What? Wait a minute. We're having our wedding here.
Of course, I'll take responsibility and make sure it's canceled.
Dad spoke clearly, silencing Julia, who looked like she was about to throw a fit. Seeing that, Tom nodded and said, "Yeah, I suppose so."
Well, Julia and her fiancé Richard didn't seem to want anything to do with me as a high school graduate. So maybe that's for the best. I'm sure neither of you would want to hold a ceremony at a church run by a high school grad.
With a cheerful smile, Tom made his point, and Julia finally seemed to understand the situation.
No way. I'm going to have a better wedding than Catherine here. I've already bragged about it to my friends. No way, no way, no way.
Julia stomped her feet in frustration. There were no words to describe her behavior other than pathetic.
Give it up. It was wrong for your mother and me to give in every time you threw a tantrum.
Come on, Julia's crying. Can't you just let us have our wedding here? Having relatives like us with impressive backgrounds would be a plus for the church's reputation.
Richard approached Dad, rubbing his hands together, but Dad glared at him sharply.
What plus? It's nothing but a minus.
Eek.
How is this acceptable? Not only did you not inform us of the wedding, but you showed up with a smug smile and said, "We'll be getting married here, so please remember that." Unbelievable.
Realizing that tears wouldn't sway Dad, Julia stopped crying and began making excuses.
But we decided to get married suddenly, and we were busy. I don't really understand proper greetings.
With her lips pouting, making excuses, Julia received a harsh look from Dad.
That's enough. I don't need relatives with no common sense who just want to throw around the term intellectual leaders. Julia, I've decided to cut ties with you.
Julia forced a stiff smile at Dad's sudden declaration.
What? Come on, Dad, that's a bit much for a joke.
You think I'd say something like this as a joke? Take a good look at yourself all alone and think about how terribly you've treated others.
Hearing Dad's declaration, Julia and Richard turned pale and began to panic.
No, you can't do that, Dad. I love being known as the daughter of the CEO who graduated from an intellectual leaders-only university.
I don't care. Isn't that husband of yours also one of those so-called intellectual leaders? Why don't you try boasting as the wife of an intellectual leader next?
Dad turned away with a dismissive snort, and Richard turned even paler.
We're in trouble, Julia. I quit my job because I thought I was marrying into a rich family, with your dad being a CEO. If we're disowned, I'll be unemployed.
You've got to be kidding me. I just announced I'd be a stay-at-home wife after we got married. I've already completed the resignation paperwork.
Julia and Richard began shouting at each other, and we just watched them blankly. They really didn't think this through at all. I said in disbelief, and Tom nodded gently.
Like a catapult, those two just launched themselves.
Tom, that's kind of a confusing metaphor. In the end, Julia and Richard were escorted away by my angry father, still yelling. As for Tom and me, we were able to have our ideal wedding at the church where Tom served as head priest, just as planned. We were overjoyed, especially since our relatives and friends complimented the beautiful ceremony and enjoyed it. Of course, my sister Julia was not in attendance. After being dragged around by her whims for so long, I honestly felt relieved to be free. Apparently, Julia and Richard, despite their fancy academic backgrounds, were struggling to find new jobs due to their sky-high pride. One day, I received a call from Julia, who seemed desperate. Hello.
Oh. You finally picked up. Sis, could you lend me some money? We're really struggling to make ends meet. I'll pay you back soon, promise.
Talking quickly, Julia sounded like she hadn't given up her extravagant lifestyle even after losing her job. Oh, really? Begging for help from me, a high school grad and someone who chose a high school grad? Julia, where's your pride? I replied confidently, and Julia stammered, trying to make excuses.
Come on. I didn't know Tom was a capable guy, even if he's a high school grad. Look, I'm sorry. You must be well off as the wife of a head priest, right? So just a little bit.
Deciding that this was the perfect time to say my piece, I cleared my throat and took a deep breath. Stop saying such pathetic things. If you want to call yourself an intellectual leader, then bite down on a rock if you have to, find a job, and work hard to contribute to society. I heard Julia gasp on the other end of the phone. Satisfied with that, I hung up. Since then, I haven't heard from Julia at all. Tom and I are busy every day working to protect the church. Tom, who serves as the head priest, is gentle and sometimes a bit clueless, but he's incredibly impressive. I've also started attending college to earn a seminary qualification so I can support him properly. Our days are quite busy, but working hard toward our goals makes life fulfilling and full of happiness.
There's no need for a child from someone in their 30s. Step aside.
I decided to get engaged after being actively pursued by a younger coworker. However, his mom opposed it because of my age, and my fiancé said, I'm going to find a younger woman to marry. Maybe it's my fault for not being a better judge of character, but I can't forgive what his mom said. Then a powerful ally appeared. It's time for a big revenge plan. My name is Natalie Kelly. I'm 34 years old and work as an editor for a comic publishing company. I'm single. Recently, more comics have been going digital, and our editorial team decided to launch a webcomic app, for which I was appointed as the leads. Now that I'm in my mid-30s, maybe I should think about my marriage and kids. But my career is going well, and I've never really wanted to get married. Honestly, I'm fine staying single for the rest of my life. Since my family lives in New York City, I still live at home. I contribute to the household expenses, but I make a pretty good salary, so I still have plenty left over.
Time to get married.
My dad used to nag me, but ever since my older brother got married and had kids, he's backed off a bit.
Kids are the best.
Now he says that while holding his grandchild. If it weren't for that, living at home would be truly comfortable. My mom is mostly on my dad's side.
It's your life, so live it how you want. Just make sure you don't have any regrets.
That actually hits me the hardest. Is there really anyone out there living without regrets?
Hey, Natalie, want to grab a bite to eat today? I found a great place.
The one who spoke to me was my junior coworker, Tim Simpson. Not today. I'm heading over to see Mark to discuss his new series.
Oh, bummer. But it's all thanks to you that Mark is going to serialize with our webcomic, right, Natalie?
Mark Knight is a comic artist known as a leading figure in the horror genre with a lot of diehard fans. I got close to him when I was a rookie, though back then it was tough. He was really difficult to work with. After getting to know his better, it turns out he's not so much difficult as extremely shy, and once he opens up, he's actually quite sweet. He was adamantly against making digital versions of his comics. I just want more people to read your comics, Mark. I passionately persuaded him, and I managed to get the already published volumes released as books and secured a new series on our webcomic. That accomplishment is why I was appointed as lead.
That's amazing. I want to become an editor like you as soon as possible, Natalie.
Tim is such an adorable junior coworker. He's 5 years younger than me. He really respects me and always follows me around. He's a bit of a quiet, mild-mannered type, but whenever he invites me out for a meal, he insists on paying. I can't let a junior pay for me. I always try to cover it.
Natalie, if a guy says he'll pay, you should just say thank you and let him. Besides, I only pay for people I like.
He's a bit cheeky, refusing to let me pay. You're such a cheeky one. Despite saying that, it secretly makes me happy. Even I have a bit of a feminine side, after all. I knew that Tim liked me, but dating someone from the same office can be complicated, and the fact that he's 5 years younger bothered me. So I had been dodging his advances for over a year. But well, one thing led to another. After a couple of drinks, we ended up in that kind of mood, and eventually in that kind of relationship. It's something that happens often enough between adults. Let's not get all clingy at work, okay?
Got it. But in exchange, let's get engaged.
His response took me by surprise.
It feels a little insecure without any commitment. If we get engaged, I'll feel more at ease.
I thought it was almost like something a girl would say. But having been a young girl myself once, I understood how he felt. So we started dating with marriage in mind, and I introduced him to my parents. My parents and my brother's family welcomed him kindly, for the most part. But after he left, my dad, looking grumpy, made a snide remark.
What was that? Such a wimpy guy. He won't be able to protect you when it counts.
He's way better than you, Dad. Acting all high and mighty just because you're a man. I got mad, and we ended up having an argument.
Okay, both of you, enough already. Nowadays, they call them mild-mannered guys or something like that, and apparently they're popular. I still prefer someone like your father, though.
Well,
with my mom saying that, my dad turned red and fell silent. I couldn't tell if he was blushing from anger or embarrassment, but it was probably the latter. I do wonder what my mom sees in such an old-school, stubborn man, but maybe their marriage is better than I thought. However, not long after, something happened that seemed to prove my dad right. That day, Tim and I were having drinks at a casual local bar. Growing up in a small town, I've always preferred simple, local places rather than trendy, fancy spots, and I prefer a beer over a cocktail. That night, I was enjoying some beef stew, potato salad, and grilled sausages. Tim, being from a classy neighborhood like Upper West Side, apparently wasn't used to pub like this. He was cautiously trying the beef stew for the first time, and then he smiled.
Hey, it's actually pretty good.
Then, a group of 3 men at the table next to us called over to me. Hey there, heading for some fun with your young boyfriend later? These days, saying something like that to a woman could easily cause trouble, but it was just a casual comment over drinks, and I knew there was no ill intent, so I responded lightly. Yeah, jealous much? Tim's smile quickly faded, and he whispered to me.
Hey, don't bother with guys like that.
And the way he said it had this condescending, belittling tone. Sure, the men who called out to me were in work clothes, probably grabbing a drink after work, but we weren't at some fancy bar in Manhattan, so it was totally fine. Even whispers can be heard sometimes.
Did you just call us guys like that, kid?
One of the men, with a bit of a gruff voice, said, and Tim visibly panicked.
No, I didn't say anything. Natalie, let's go.
He got up and headed to the register. We still had drinks and snacks left.
Hey, your boyfriend's leaving? Why don't you come have a drink with us, sweetheart?
The man kept talking, but Tim left the pub without even turning back. I'm sorry for what he said, guys. I'll make sure he learns better. See you around. I smiled and said to the men,
Oh, it's all good. Tell your wimpy boyfriend we said hi.
They laughed and waved at me. A wimpy boyfriend. Yeah, the way he freaked out was more than wimpy. It was pathetic. Like my dad said, maybe he really wouldn't be able to protect me when it mattered. I mean, not being able to handle some light teasing at a pub is pretty sad, and that condescending attitude was seriously uncalled for. I thought as I followed Tim out of the pub.
Natalie, you really shouldn't mess with guys like that.
Tim said, looking awkward, probably realizing how pathetic his actions had been. Guys like that?
You know, those muscle-headed laborers, right?
That was blatant jobs discrimination. Did he really think it was okay to look down on anyone who wasn't in a suit? My dad's a construction worker, you know?
What?
Tim froze at my words.
I mean, craftsmen are different.
He made a poor excuse.
What if something happened because you got too friendly with a stranger? If they held a grudge or started stalking you, that'd be trouble.
No, things like that rarely happen. Sure, with all the information shared online these days, some people might think the world is full of dangerous individuals. But if you're that worried, you'll never be able to connect with anyone. Before I could finish, Tim cut me off.
If anything happened, I wouldn't be able to protect you as I am now. Maybe I should learn some martial arts or something, so I can protect you properly.
I couldn't help but feel my heart skip a beat when he said that. In the end, Tim never actually took up martial arts, and he never really protected me either. I also went to visit Tim's houses. It was a pretty impressive home in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. His parents were refined and calm, basically the complete opposite of my family.
So, Natalie, how old are you?
Tim's mom asked, and I wondered how much Tim had told them about me as I answered. I'm 34.
Oh my, you really are that age, aren't you? 5 years older than Tim.
The way she said, really that age, made me think she already knew beforehand from Tim. If she knew, then asking like that felt intentionally hurtful. And then she continued.
At 34, it's almost too late to have children. Timmy's our only son, and both my husband and I are hoping to see a grandchild soon.
She said it with a gentle smile, but it was clear she didn't welcome me. I was also a bit put off by how she called him Timmy.
Sorry, I never thought my mom would say something like that.
On our way to the station, Tim apologized repeatedly. Well, if her only son says he wants to marry a woman 5 years older than him, I guess that's how she'd react. It was somewhat understandable. But if I married Tim, there was a good chance I'd end up living in that house. I had a feeling they'd ask me to quit my jobs too. Plus, I had a secret I still hadn't told Tim. Maybe sensing my anxiety about marriage, Tim tried to reassure me.
Even if we get married, let's just live as the two of us until we have kids. I want you to keep working too. It'd be such a waste for someone as talented as you to quit. And when we have kids, I'll help with the housework and raising them.
But the fact that he mentioned kids twice made me think that having children was a given and non-negotiable. I have just one condition, or rather, a request.
Sure, anything. If it means I get to marry you, Natalie, I'll do whatever you want.
Since Tim said that, I decided to share my secret and make a request. Tim agreed willingly. At that moment, I thought maybe I could make it work with him. He might be a bit unreliable, but I felt like he genuinely put me first. About 2 weeks after visiting Tim's parents, I noticed something seemed off with him. You seem a bit down, don't you?
Do I? I don't think so. Anyway, why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? My mom's really excited to cook for you.
Honestly, I wasn't too keen on the idea, but I couldn't exactly refuse. Plus, if we were going to get married, it wouldn't hurt to try her cooking. Differences in habits and taste preferences are often points where newlyweds stumble, after all. Okay, sure, I'm looking forward to it. When I said that, I noticed Tim's face tense up a bit, but I didn't think much of it at the time. That day, Tim was supposed to pick me up from the station, but he messaged me that morning saying he had an unexpected errand and couldn't come. So, I stopped by a shop his mom liked and bought a fruitcake as a gift before heading to his house. Thank you for having me today. I heard you like the cake from this shop, so... The response I got after greeting them and handing over the cake was unexpected.
Oh, so Timmy invited you here saying we'd have dinner at home.
What?
Well, it's fine. Anyway, come on in.
With that, I stepped from the entrance into the living room, where Tim was sitting on an expensive-looking sofa, his head down. He knew I had arrived but didn't look at me. His dad wasn't around.
I asked you to come here today because there's something I need to discuss with you.
Really? I thought you wanted me to come because you wanted to cook. Feeling something was off, I asked.
Why would I need to cook for you?
She said it very softly, but I heard it clearly.
Look, I'll be blunt. We don't need a child born from someone in their 30s. Besides, there's no guarantee you'll even be able to have a child, right?
What?
You know, as a woman, don't you? The older you get, the harder it is to have kids, and the risks of complications during childbirth or having a child with disabilities increase.
I knew that too. It's true, but on the flip side, there's no guarantee that being young means you'll definitely conceive and have a healthy baby.
You're 34, right? Even if you got pregnant now, by the time you give birth, it would be a late pregnancy.
That was also true. There's no guarantee we'd conceive right after getting married, and even if we did, I'd be 35 by the time I gave birth. But there are lots of couples like that. There's no such thing as a risk-free pregnancy or childbirth. And marriage is about making that commitment together, understanding the risks, and supporting each other. Despite everything his mom was saying to me, Tim just sat there on the sofa, head down, saying nothing.
Timmy is a kind boy, so I'm saying this on his behalf. You're 5 years older. Step aside now.
The kind Tim didn't defend me, and instead, in a small voice, he said,
Sorry, I'm going to date someone in their 20s, so let's break up.
A flood of emotions ran through my mind. He was the one who approached me in the first place. I never even wanted to get married or have kids. But somewhere along the line, I fell for him too, and I thought we could build a life together as a couple.
He won't be able to protect you when it matters.
His words came back to me. He was right. If he can't stand up for me now, at this very moment, against his own mom, there's no way I can marry him. I understand. Well then, I'll be leaving now. I wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Tim followed me as I headed to the front door.
I'm really sorry, but my mom told me all these scary stories about late pregnancies. I do love you, Natalie, but I just don't think I can do it.
He said, eyes brimming with tears. You're right. You can't handle it. I get it now. Go ahead and find a young bride, just like your mom said. Goodbye. With that, I left the house. I felt some anger, but there was no regret. In fact, I thought it was probably better to realize this before getting married. Since I had some doubts myself, I convinced myself that this was for the best. To keep the tears from falling, I looked up at the sky for a while. When I got home, a letter had arrived from somewhere. It was a test report that no longer mattered now. The truth is, back in my late 20s, I went to the gynecologist because of irregular periods and found out I had fibroids in my uterus. They weren't big enough to require surgery, and we decided to monitor them for a while. With my busy work schedule, I ended up ignoring the issue. But when talks of marriage with Tim came up and he expressed a desire for children, I decided to get properly checked and treated. Uterine fibroids can sometimes cause infertility. A man and woman who plan to get married examine each other for fertility problems. When Tim proposed, I made this check a condition for us to proceed together. Usually, due to privacy concerns, test results are individually notified, but Tim said, "I don't want my mom seeing it." So we both agreed in advance for the results to be sent to my place. With a mom like his, I figured there was a good chance she'd open his mail and read it. When I saw the test results, I couldn't help but laugh.
What's going on? What's so funny? You look crazy.
My mom asked worriedly as she watched me laugh through tears. I broke up with that guy I brought home the other day. His mom told me that no one needs a child born to a woman in her 30s, so I should give up on the marriage with him.
What?
It was my dad who shouted.
That's ridiculous. What do they think our daughter is? I never liked that guy from the start. Good thing you're not marrying him.
Yeah, you were right, Dad. My parents were kind to their heartbroken daughter.
You don't have to get married. Just stay here forever.
That's what my dad said. Well, that'd be a bit of a problem too. I laughed through my tears as I replied, "I'll be fine. I still have my jobs." And I decided I'd go back to work with energy again tomorrow.
I heard you're getting married, Natalie. The editor-in-chief told me.
Mark said that to me when I went to pick up a manuscript. After I accepted Tim's proposal, he had gone and reported it to our editor-in-chief. That's why dating within the office always ends up being annoying and messy. Oh, that info is outdated. The marriage isn't happening anymore.
Really? Well, I mean, no offense, but I think that's probably for the best. I was worried about what would happen if you quit work after getting married.
Thanks for saying that. But I wasn't planning on quitting anyway. To the public, Mark's gender is unknown, and due to his delicate, beautiful illustrations, many think he's a young female artist. But in reality, he's a man in his 40s. He insists on traditional hand-drawn illustrations. So even though it's a webcomic, he draws everything on paper, which means I have to come pick up the manuscripts. At first, I thought he was a difficult person. But once we got to know each other, he turned out to be kind, friendly, and incredibly knowledgeable due to his work, which made spending time with him enjoyable. So, I actually looked forward to coming to pick up the manuscripts. Though we started out as just editor and assigned comic artist, we've become friends now. I guess I'm just not cut out for marriage. From now on, I'm going to focus even more on my work.
I see. Mind if I ask what happened?
Sure, I don't mind. I told him the whole story. By then, I wasn't even crying anymore. I could even talk about it with a bit of humor.
Why aren't you angry?
After hearing my story, he asked with a puzzled look. Well, actually, my ex had a zoospermia.
What?
I'm not that young either, and he wanted kids, so we both did a fertility check before marriage. My condition was benign, so they said I could get pregnant after surgery. Though, of course, age is an increasing factor.
Did you tell your ex?
I didn't. He's not part of my life anymore, and it's not something I need to go out of my way to tell him. Plus, I wouldn't want him to think I was being spiteful. I said that, but truthfully. I had debated whether it would be kinder to tell him. Should I let him continue his search for a young wife, unaware, until one day he finds out through another test?
There's no need to tell him. It's his life. You don't need to be involved anymore.
When Mark said that, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders.
Oh, but you guys still work at the same company, right? It might be hard to not be involved at all.
It's fine. He actually requested a transfer and moved to another department. He's not the strongest person, so I guess he didn't want to run into me at work. He's in the girls' comic division now. I'm sure he felt some guilt too. Honestly, I was glad he was out of my sight. Even though we were in different departments, since we were in the same publishing company, I'd still hear things about him. Apparently, Tim was regularly going to group dates and really putting effort into finding a young wife. I wasn't looking to badmouth an ex, but since a lot of people knew we'd been engaged, they were curious and asked about our breakup. His mom told me they didn't need a child born from a woman in her 30s, so he broke it off. I gave that straightforward answer to a close colleague, and it seemed to be a more shocking reason for the breakup than I expected. Tim ended up being known behind his back as a mama's boy with a toxic mom. Well, it wasn't wrong, so it couldn't be helped. Tim's reputation with the women at work had tanked, but it seemed he found someone at one of those group dates. They said it was a 25-year-old office lady, that she was pretty cute, and that they were getting married next month. There were multiple people eager to tell me, even though I hadn't asked. People love a good scandal or a dramatic twist, especially when it involves someone they know. They were all very sympathetic towards me, but honestly, that got a little annoying too. One day, I ran into Tim in the hallway. Considering we worked in the same building, it was bound to happen. I heard you're getting married. Congratulations, I said with a smile.
Oh, thank you.
Tim averted his eyes awkwardly.
I really am sorry, Natalie.
I didn't need an apology at this point. It's okay. You're marrying a woman in her 20s just like your mom wanted, right? That's great.
Yeah, she's pregnant, so we're kind of rushing our wedding.
What?
Well, I mean, you might think it's too soon since it hasn't even been a year since we broke up, but...
That's not the point. Is she really pregnant?
Yeah.
I see. That's good. Congratulations. Tim seemed to think I was shocked because his new girlfriend was pregnant. He kept apologizing, saying, "I'm sorry," over and over. But that wasn't why I froze, of course. I contacted Mark to see if I could visit his place because I had something to discuss.
Of course, I've got some delicious roast beef here. Just bring a bottle of red wine as my consultation fee.
Since he said that, I bought a slightly expensive bottle of red wine and went to his place. I needed someone to talk to, but I couldn't tell anyone at work. Mark knew the situation and seemed like someone who could offer fair, level-headed advice.
It could be a mistake in the test results, but I've heard that test is quite accurate, so it seems unlikely. Which would mean...
Yeah, It's probably not Tim's child, right?
No kidding. They call that brood parasitism, right? So what do you want to do?
That was exactly what I wanted advice on. Should I just pretend I don't know? Or should I tell Tim about his azoospermia diagnosis?
I already told you before, I think there's no need to tell him. It's his life. If he ends up raising someone else's kid as his own, unaware, then that's better for him. Ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Wait a sec. You don't seem satisfied. What do you really want? Who are you mad at?
I'm mad at that brood parasitism woman, but I've never met her, so it doesn't feel real. As for Tim, I just think I wasn't good at judging him. But
The person you really can't forgive is his mom, right?
yes, I can't forgive what she said to me. I want to forget it, but it keeps coming back and making me mad.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, got it. I'll help you get revenge on his mom.
When Mark used the word revenge, it made me realize that yes, I wanted revenge against her. But how? Even if I contacted Tim's mom now, she probably wouldn't agree to meet me. While I was thinking that, Mark started making a phone call.
Can I speak to Tim Simpson, please?
It seemed like he was calling the editorial department for Girls Comics where Tim worked. Mark contributes significantly to our company's revenue, so no one would find it strange if he suddenly called a different department.
Sorry to bother you all of a sudden. The story I'm working on has a mother in her 50s, and your mom is around that age, right? I was wondering if you could tell me if she takes any classes or does any activities?
Mark was casually getting personal information about Tim's mom. Maybe it's an editor's instinct to allow almost anything for the sake of the work.
She goes to a flower arrangement class at the Cultural Center by the station every Wednesday at 2 p.m.
After ending the call, Mark turned to me with a mischievous grin. The next Wednesday, Mark and I waited on the first floor of the building where Tim's mom attended her class. Middle-aged women with the air of wealthy housewives were coming down from the elevator one after another.
Oh, it's you. What brings you here?
Tim's mom noticed me and looked suspiciously at Mark, who was standing beside me. It probably looked a bit odd to see me in a business suit next to Mark, who was dressed in well-worn denim from head to toe. But just to defend Mark's honor, those were quite expensive vintage jeans. I need to talk to you. Do you have a moment? When I said that, she looked at me with a curious expression.
And who is this gentleman with you?
This is Mark Knight, our publishing company's leading comic artist.
Oh, I've heard the name from my son. You're quite famous, aren't you? So what brings you to talk to me?
She looked excited. Her curiosity and starstruck enthusiasm clearly piqued. Just as expected, exactly the reaction we wanted. I invited her to a cafe inside the building. I heard Tim is getting married. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Even when her son's former girlfriend, whom she caused the breakup with, said that, she didn't seem the least bit concerned. Today, I'm not here to congratulate you. There's something I really need to tell you.
What is it?
Her expression remained curious and excited. I pulled out the contents from an envelope with the test results and placed them in front of her.
What is this?
These are the results of an infertility test we did since we were planning to get married.
Azoospermia. Who?
It is Tim.
That's a lie. What do you mean? Why are you doing this to me?
She was extremely flustered, but didn't seem to believe it. Or rather, she probably didn't want to believe it. It's not harassment. But I heard your son's fiancé is pregnant, isn't she? That's good news, right?
What? Oh.
It seemed she finally understood. Her face quickly turned pale. But the test results aren't 100% certain. When I said that, she looked momentarily relieved, expressing hopeful optimism.
Right. There's no way Tim couldn't have kids. That can't be true.
I'll give you this report. Whether you keep this to yourself until you take it to the grave or suggest Tim get retested is entirely up to you.
What? Take it to the grave. But what if the child isn't my son's?
I wouldn't know. It's none of my business anymore.
But if he gets retested and finds out he really can't have kids, Tim would be devastated. And if the baby turns out not to be his...
Tim's mom began to frantically tug at her carefully styled hair.
What should I do?
You could always choose to act like you know nothing and love the grandchild as your own, even without a blood connection.
No, you've got to be kidding. That's the one thing I absolutely won't accept.
No matter how this played out, a confrontation was inevitable. I smiled gently and spoke slowly, as if to explain it carefully to her. Just like you wanted, your son found a young bride in her 20s through his dating efforts. Leaving Tim's mom muttering to herself, I paid for everyone's bill, and Mark and I left the cafe.
I guess I didn't really need to be here.
Not at all. If I'd been alone, she wouldn't have followed me to the cafe. Just having you there made me feel so much more confident. Plus, you're the mastermind behind this plan. I felt genuinely relieved. The plan was simple. I hand over the burden I could no longer carry entirely to Tim's mom.
The pass the buck strategy was a success. How about a celebratory drink?
Mark took me to a bar that was just my style. As expected, Tim's mom didn't keep the secret to herself until the grave. And she apparently chose the worst possible moment during the formal meeting between both families.
The baby you're carrying isn't my son's?
Naturally, things got ugly after that. She could have at least waited until after a retest. But instead, she made a scene without saying anything to Tim. The retest results confirmed that Tim had a zoospermia, and the child wasn't his. The engagement was called off just days before the wedding. I have no idea what happened to that woman after that. Since the child seemed to belong to another man she couldn't marry, she might have had a showdown with him or decided to become a single mom. Either way, the child wasn't at fault, and I hope it didn't end in misery. Still, since she's someone I've never met, I can't bring myself to care that deeply. As for why I know so much about all this, it's because Tim told me himself. Shocked by both his medical condition and everything else, Tim looked quite exhausted. Are you okay? Some women don't want kids, and there are plenty of happy couples without children, so you shouldn't worry too much. I found myself offering words of comfort when I saw him in the break room.
I heard you're going to be the editor-in-chief of the new horror webcomic publication. That's a big promotion.
Thanks. Honestly, I'm having so much fun at work right now. The headline artist for that webcomic is, of course, Mark.
I've decided to move out. After everything that happened, I realized staying with my mom would ruin me. It sucks that I didn't realize this sooner. Maybe I wouldn't have ended things with you.
According to Tim, his mom had become even more attached to him, begging every night in tears for him to stay by her side, saying she no longer needed grandchildren. We can't change the past, but we can change the future. I think Tim made the right decision. Do your best. I'm rooting for you.
Thank you. You do your best too, Natalie.
One of us extended a hand, and we shook. I felt genuinely good. Mark's new series in the upcoming comic is a mother-son horror story. The mother, driven by her love for her son, descends into madness, and it's terrifying.
Sorry for using this as material, but I got the idea from this whole situation.
I'm honored to have been of help.
So, are you planning to get back together with your ex-fiancé?
No way. We shook hands, wished each other well, and parted on good terms.
I see. That's good.
What?
Well, would you continue being my partner from now on?
Of course. Let's keep making great work together.
Oh, I didn't phrase that well. That was supposed to be a proposal.
What? I mean, I do like Mark, and I definitely enjoy being with him.
I don't really want kids, and besides, the work we create together is kind of like our child, isn't it?
He seemed to be trying to say something profound. Horror comics as our child. I laughed as I said that.
Maybe that wasn't the best comparison.
Seeing him look troubled, I answered, "That's totally fine. Being partners in both work and life might actually be nice." And when I invited him to my place, I thought my dad might have something to say again since Mark is tall but very thin.
That guy's a craftsman. He's lived by his own skill alone and impressive. Natalie, you've got a good eye this time.
My dad praised him highly, which made me feel oddly relieved.